Hello and welcome to 6 Part. Today I'm gonna continue the story What If Deku Got the Phoenix Force Part 2. If you enjoy this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
The first day of the sports festival was here. One of the major athletic events in the nation. Not only will its events be televised throughout the nation, but also globally. The new generation of heroes, as well as potential interns and sidekicks for any well-known hero agencies, were first shown to the public. Izuku Midoriya was understandably nervous as he made his way to the enormous stadium where the event would be held. He and his mother would have been at home watching it on TV for years. He is now participating in it as a contestant. However, as he headed to the changing rooms, the joy of the occasion overshadowed those unpleasant emotions. A faint sense of tension pervaded the pleasant feelings and general environment. Additional pro-heroes were on the move, serving as security. UA fulfilled their pledge to prevent another incident similar to the USJ. With many bag checkpoints and Izuku needing to provide his school ID to get inside, security was stepped up. Cynical people would claim that by increasing security, UA was caving into the League of Villains scaremongering. But the festival itself overshadowed those emotions. A few minutes later, Izuku joined the others in the foyer after putting on his gym suit and tying his red sneakers. Izuku's classmates were excitedly chatting among themselves and promoting their own performances, so you could sense the excitement in the air. Bakugo was also in a positive frame of mind, which prevented him from shouting at everyone. Izuku turned to listen to the sound of footfall. The number 2 hero's son, Todoroki, was approaching him. There was purpose in his eyes. Todoroki yelled, "Midoriya," in a monotone. Since he was the only Midoriya in the class, Izuku felt instantly foolish and pointed at himself in confusion. "Yes, you," Todoroki said in response to Izuku's silent query. He stated, as if it were a fact, "Now don't say anything else and listen. I know that out of everyone in this room, I am the strongest. Naturally, some people read." Bakugo didn't agree with that assertion, but Todoroki went on. "But you're proving to be different from everyone else. Your quirk is simple, yet powerful at the same time. You are able to evolve and adapt it to new situations by instinct. And, despite that, your skill with it feels relatively green compared to everyone else. All of these things don't add up, unless there was something more to you, Izuku Midoriya." Izuku swallowed. Did Todoroki have a glimmer of reality? That Izuku's quirk wasn't innate? That some strange underground rock gave it to him? Todoroki probably wouldn't have suspected that last part, to be honest, but Izuku's terrified mind was too busy to be concerned. "There is only one possibility in my mind that ties everything together. Midoriya, are you a descendant of a government project?" Bewildered, Izuku responded, What?" Izuku's bewilderment caused no change in Todoroki's impassive expression. "There was a government project in the United States long ago that attempted to unlock psychic powers among individuals," Todoroki went on to say. "Some of those subjects must have escaped and later have children before and during the rise of quirks." Izuku turned to face his fellow students, hoping that they, too, thought Todoroki's musings about conspiracies were strange and inappropriate. Unfortunately, nobody else appeared to be really interested. Izuku turned back to Todoroki, who said, "It doesn't matter where you came from, or how strong your quirk is. All that you should know is that I will beat you in the tournament. Nobody else matters." Bakugo's exclamation of, "Bullshit," appeared to capture everyone's attention, and the majority of the class agreed. Izuku braced himself to respond to Todoroki's assertion. "I'll be honest, Todoroki, you probably are the strongest kid in class," Izuku responded. And there was evidence for it. Todoroki's proficiency with ice was almost unmatched. But that doesn't discredit the rest of us. We've worked hard to get where we are, through thick and thin. So yeah, maybe you will win the festival, but that doesn't mean we will make it easy for you." Izuku's words cause a subtle change in Todoroki's expression. An intercom voice announces that the opening statement is about to begin before he can respond. "Come on, everyone," Yaoyorozu said, gesturing to the doorway. "Form up orderly, side by side." Either by chance, accident, or cunning planning, Izuku ended up sandwiched between Iida and Uraraka. Class 1A entered the sun after leaving the waiting area. On entering the stadium, the audience cheered the freshmen as they entered. A number of pupils, including Izuku, gaped at the gathering. Here they are, the star darlings of UA's freshman classes, Class 1A. Present Mike was putting up his best effort as the festival's announcer from a distance. "They've faced villains before midterms, so don't give them just a passing glance. These students are sure to knock your socks off." Izuku waved to the cheering throng while grinning. In order for his mother to see him on television, he hoped to catch the lens of a camera that was tuned in. Just because they're not in the spotlight doesn't mean they're rising stars as well. Let's give a big welcome to Class 1B. Compared to 1A, the titular Class 1B arrived to less cheers. Izuku had mixed feelings about the nearby class. One could argue that the villain attack on the USJ unfairly gave 1A more attention. Like Izuku's peers, 1B undoubtedly contained gifted and committed kids who would have demonstrated their abilities. However, Izuku remembered the altercation between 1A and 1B. Some kids in 1B believed that 1A were a group of conceited jerks who took pride in their ability to survive the attack. One of the blonde children in the group had a huge sense of superiority. Izuku was aware that his classmates were more than the mob believed. Additionally, one child mentioned that if general studies students perform well at the festival, they can advance to the hero course. It guy sounded like it, but Izuku wasn't sure if it was real. The news about the remaining freshman classes interrupted Izuku's reverie. These comprised the business students, the support classes, and, lastly, the general studies course. For everyone to see, they are all on a single stage. Everyone knew that Midnight was on top of a raised platform when they heard the crack of a whip. I know you're all chomping at the bit to tear into each other, but first, some establishment. The heroine aged 18 or older stated. I'm Midnight, and I'll be your referee for each and every event. I see one of you break the rules, and you won't just be punished. You'll be disqualified from the rest of the events. I promise, you won't enjoy it as much as I will. Izuku trembled uncontrollably at the loaded comment. He questioned the school board's choice to assign someone known as the R-rated heroine to supervise a group of hormonal teenage boys during these kinds of situations. Naturally, he brushed it off before the next shocking revelation. Before the announcement of the freshman events, it's a tradition for a representative from one of the classes to make a speech. Ladies and gentlemen, give a warm welcome to Class 1A's Katsuki Bakugo. Some of 1A's students' perplexity and anxiety were concealed by the roar of the crowd. Uraraka muttered to Izuku, really, why did they pick Bakugo? Couldn't they have picked someone more qualified for this, like Iida or Yaoyorozu? I don't know, Izuku said with a shrug, but maybe this won't be so bad, right? Bakugo approached the mic. Upon arriving, he cleared his throat before continuing. I would like to recognize everyone as stepping stones towards my victory, thank you. Some members of the audience as well as the other classes jeered Bakugo's remarks for its plain insolence. Despite the jeers and boos from everyone, even his own protesting students who were now targets because of his remarks, Bakugo calmly made his way back to 1A. Uraraka remarked, oh, it was way worse, while Izuku buried his face in his hands. The jeers persisted until they were cut off by Midnight's whip crack. That's enough, yelled Midnight. Thank you, Bakugo, for the encouraging speech. Now, on to the first event, which will be determined right now. A huge wheel of many colors rose up behind her. It was spun by Midnight, and as the wheel continued to spin and eventually came to a stop, tings filled the air. The first event is the obstacle course. A quick explanation of the rules, which essentially amounted to, stay within the lanes and don't kill anybody, was given, and then all of the freshmen were escorted to the starting line. The actual race took place in a different building outside the stadium. Izuku recognized that the entryway was the first barrier as he attempted to scan the throng of kids scuttling in front of him. The expansive starting field dwindled in the direction of the starting line. In essence, it would serve as a significant bottleneck for everybody. Almost everyone, actually. The first event was an obstacle course, and Izuku would be lying if he didn't feel torn about how he could cheat with his flight. It would be a fantastic method to demonstrate the amount of effort he put into his training over the course of the weeks. However, it would also be unfair to those who could only remain on the ground. The countdown was shown by a light over them. Izuku stiffened as he awaited the sign. Izuku dashed to the starting line as the alarm went off and the green light flashed. As the crowd of kids behind him jostled to get to the front, he did his best to do so. After the bottlenecking eventually occurred, another unforeseen event occurred. Izuku noticed a big patch of ice close to the starting line, and a gust of frigid air swept over him. Izuku was certain that Todoroki was the only one responsible for this. He could still see children trying to avoid the ice or getting stuck in it. Numerous people were evading it, and Bakugo had already blown his way out. Izuku gave a headshake. He was there to compete, he didn't have to be fair. Izuku launched his flight, much more smoothly this time because of his training. Izuku flew through the tunnel exit after swerving over his classmates' heads. Izuku found it difficult to resist soaking up the sunlight and the competition's energy when it was outside. Both Present Mic and Eraserhead served as commentators, and their voices echoed over loudspeakers. Izuku could see that Todoroki was already ahead down below. The man was skating on an ice path that was constantly being formed. Students were quickly catching up, though. Bakugo was gaining distance by using his blasts as extra jumps. Determined to win this race, Izuku sped ahead. The voice of Present Mic cut through the roaring wind in Izuku's ears and said, "Would you look at that? Midoriya is soaring over the competition, literally." Looking back, the telekinetic saw that he was significantly separating himself from the other members of the pack. He was actually gaining so much ground that Izuku believed he might have already overcome the first barrier. Izuku's attention was drawn forward by the faint sound of spinning gears, but there was no time to react to the enormous robot arm that was about to strike him. Izuku was hurled backward and struck the earth. He was shocked that nothing felt damaged, and his head was ringing from the landing. He didn't even have a bleeding nose, to be honest. But he was unprepared for what he witnessed next. Looks like Midoriya's the first to experience the Robo Inferno. Izuku saw a horde of entrance exam robots when he looked up. However, these weren't merely 1, 2, or even 3-point shots. No, it was the enormous zero-pointers. Izuku nearly sat there in terror, but he was being overtaken by the sound of Bakugo's explosions and Todoroki's ice. Izuku flew once more, but this time he went higher than the zero-pointers could go. He watched the speck of Todoroki stop one of the zero-pointers' treads just as he was ready to zoom by. If the Titanic robot hadn't been toppling over and ready to destroy a number of the rivals, this wouldn't have been an issue. Izuku telekinetically grabbed the falling zero-pointer out of reflex and attempted to relocate it out of the racer's path. But he was so preoccupied with the robot that he failed to see Bakugo charging at him. With a yell, "Get out of the way, Deku!" the explosive boy pushed Izuku in the air. In the middle of the race, Izuku lost focus on the descending zero-pointer, causing it to crash. "No!" exclaimed Izuku. Thankfully, the majority of individuals either moved aside or possessed special abilities that allowed them to avoid being crushed by a massive robot, such as Kirishima's escape from the robot's body. Even in a race, Midoriya still tries to be a shining example of heroism. "Talk about sportsmanship, am I right?" said Present Mic. Eraserhead remarked, "Too bad this is a race and not a rescue operation." "Oh, Eraserhead, you got such a way with words, don't you, buddy?" Izuku was aware that his teacher was correct. Yes, a hero's role was to save people, but at the moment, he needs to finish this course. Izuku took off once more and caught up to the pack leader. There was the second barrier. A pit that appears to have no bottom and has some rock formations that are too far for the average person to jump. A line of ropes was the only means of crossing. Or you could just fly over that if you were like Izuku. Izuku was regaining the lead now. Todoroki and Bakugo were unable to fly as well as he could. They were forced to use jumps that were augmented by ice or explosions. Izuku was now above the pit and heading for the third challenge, which was a vacant area with a warning sign close by. They genuinely didn't think of a person who could fly, man. Izuku was flying over when he failed to see something coming directly at him. He hardly noticed anything striking him before he was hurled directly to the ground and came to a complete stop. Izuku's ears were filled with Present Mic's comments, "Looks like Midoriya is the first victim of the minefield. Don't worry folks, these mines won't leave any burns or scars, but they are not fun to be hit by." So, Izuku thought, that's what hit him. An absolute mine. It wasn't nice, even if, as Present Mic stated, it didn't burn him or get shrapnel close to his vital organs. Izuku was trying to stand when he saw something strange on the floor. He felt something more metallic around his torso, yet in other places it felt like real dirt. He was on a mine. Well, terrific. Was it a failure? Did it simply fail to go off? Izuku would really not want to be within this thing's blast radius, even though it wouldn't kill him. And it looks like it's neck and neck between Todoroki and Bakugo. It's so close I can't even watch. Well, if you won't, I have to, which I don't. Really? Izuku was shocked that they had surpassed him by this much. He didn't want to disappoint anyone, including himself, who had confided in him that he would give it his all. Izuku positioned his arms and legs in a launching stance while still laying on his stomach. His strength tensed like a bowstring as it flowed over him. At last he bounded ahead. Izuku was traveling at a dizzying pace, inches from the earth. He could hardly hear the blast from the mine he was on. Izuku pushed himself quicker than ever before, harder and harder. In an effort to minimize drag, he even extended his arms. Bakugo and Todoroki's hazy shapes were getting closer and closer until they were out of sight. He was so concentrated on the finish line that he didn't even realize he was ahead. Even though the noises of explosions and the formation of glaciers were growing closer, they seemed faint as the finish line approached. What prompted Izuku to halt was the audience's cheering. Because his pace was still carrying him, he braked in midair and drifted beyond the finish line. He glanced up at the applauding spectators. The crowd was informed via the present mic that Izuku Midoriya from Class 1A had won first place. Izuku was shocked and incredulous. So much so that he fell on his butt after unintentionally stopping his flight. However, that was irrelevant. In actuality, he prevailed. Izuku Midoriya used his own quirk to win something. It was a surreal feeling. Thousands of people were applauding him. As more and more students entered following Izuku, Todoroki, and Bakugo, Izuku humbly reveled in the applause. A group of Japanese employees were eating after work in a medium-sized American restaurant on the other side of the world. These ladies and men emigrated to the United States in pursuit of work. What made it different for each of them? With others, they desired to leave Japan and embrace the United States with all its flaws. Others accepted the position in order to support their family back home. Those who failed to find work in Japan's increasingly competitive job market. In the latter group was Hisashi Midoriya. Though it was entirely black rather than green, he shared his son's wavy mop of hair. Because he was constantly afraid of losing his tiny spectacles, which were simply there to aid in his reading, he continued to wear them. He had a respectable beard and a dad bod that was getting bigger every day. He sat at a big booth with his buddies from work and his friends' friends. "Hey, Hisashi, can you heat this up for me?" A colleague of his held a cup up to the man with the bespectacles. Hisashi had the honorable quirk of breathing flames. Although he was unable to spit out a fire-like endeavor, he taught himself that he could limit the fire to almost the point of a calphoric laser by cupping his lips together. Even if it wasn't pro-hero material, he was personally proud of it. Back in Japan, using quirks in public was now punishable by arrest. However, quirk usage was more relaxed in the United States of America. Although there were laws prohibiting specific uses of quirks, many firms and organizations were ready to overlook clients who used quirks in little ways because Americans valued their personal freedom. Hisashi watched the TV above the booth as he used his fire breath to heat his friend's drink. Coverage of the UA Sports Festival was one of the factors that led them to select this eatery. Naturally, some complained that American sportscasters rather than Japanese ones covered it, but they can only complain about what they can. Hisashi gaped as he turned to the TV. By the time they arrived, the festival had already begun, and the freshman class's first event was just coming to an end. The sight of his son's name next to first place caught Hisashi off guard. His wife emailed him over a year ago to inform him of his son's progress. Despite the physician's predictions that Izuku would never acquire a quirk, he did. She informed him that Izuku's new quirk was caused by external circumstances, but she was unable to provide further details. Izuku was enrolled in UA's hero course, something Hisashi knew would never be the case. Long-distance phone conversations or text messages on screens were used to convey all of this. When Hisashi spoke to his family, he always felt a twinge of sadness. Although he wanted he could visit more frequently, the firm and his career prevented him from doing so. The situation wasn't ideal, and Hisashi frequently wished he could take a plane home to be a father and husband to his family. Therefore, he felt proud when he looked up at the television and announced that his kid had won what was the equivalent of an Olympic event. Although Hisashi had always loved his family, their connection was strained due to the distance, and his fatherly pride had been tempered by the lack of significant milestones in Izuku's life that were shared with him. However, those emotions took center stage. Hey, look," Hisashi said, shoving his colleagues and pointing at the television. "That's my son." "What? Hisashi, what are you?" Hisashi said, "Look, at the TV," pointing to the Izuku that was displayed. "The boy with green hair. The student who won the first event. That's my son." The booth was filled with rounds of congratulations as his coworkers began to notice. Hisashi was saddened by his father's pride for his kid, even in the presence of friends. Hisashi mused to himself, "Izuku, I wish I was there with your mother, cheering you on from home." After a run, was it typical to feel a little high? Izuku Midoriya was thinking about that when the obstacle course competition came to an end. He observed the increasing number of individuals making it to the finish line. Bakugo was furious, but he chose to pout elsewhere rather than approach Izuku. Unconsciously, Todoroki shivered. Before he turned away, his eyes shifted to Izuku's. Izuku couldn't hold either of them responsible for their intense emotions. Before Izuku blasted past them, It appeared for a brief moment at the end that one of them may have prevailed. Even the telekinetic child was surprised that his gambit worked. He was still getting used to the feeling of pride in himself, so it wasn't his fault that he allowed himself to be temporarily overcome by it. He allowed Uraraka, Iida, and all of his classmates to congratulate him on his first-place finish. Mostly to check for nosebleeds, he massaged his nose. One by one, the remaining competitors crossed the finish line. Only 42 of all the freshmen would advance to the next round. Once more, Midnight rolled the wheel of games. Before eventually landing on the Calvary fight, the audience and pupils were suspended while the tacks were hitting. According to the explanation of the rules, the participants would form teams of 4. The rider atop the others would be one example. There was one at the rear and 2 at the front. Depending on their rating, each player would have a headband worth a specific number of points. For instance, the 42nd place finisher's headband was worth 5 points. 10 points were awarded for the one in 41st place, and so on. Stealing as many headbands from the opposing teams as possible without losing your own was the aim. Naturally, there were a few modifications from the original in the schoolyard. The rider would wear each team member's headband over their neck or on their head. The squad was not out if the rider's own headband was taken. The team is not out even if the formation fractures. Quirks were permitted as long as they weren't used maliciously, like harming rivals. And for the last rule, Midnight said, eagerly licking her lips. Given the points, the headband for the first-place winner of the race should only be worth 210 points. Instead, we decided to spice things up. The first-place headband is worth 10 million points. The mood of the air was altered by the announcement. Izuku thought the game would be enjoyable, but it ended up being a nightmare. Every competitor's eyes were ravenous as they gazed at Izuku. Like a fish bleeding blood in shark-infested water, even his pals gazed at him. The great reward was him. Any squad would easily win first place with just his headband. At this point, Izuku was the game's most valuable and harmful player. Izuku stood there like a deer in headlights, thinking, ooh. Oh my god, no. Midnight declared, now, we'll take 15 minutes for everyone to form teams. I'm sure the fans can't wait to see you kiddies struggle. I know I do. Children rushed to each other in the hopes of forming teams. A random student nudged Midoriya, who was still stunned by the ridiculous number of points on his skull. Izuku became aware of his surroundings and saw that hardly anyone approached him. This prompted him to look for a mate, whether it be Uraraka, Iida, or someone else. Luckily for him, he discovered both. Hey, Izuku croaked out. I'm so glad I found you guys. I really need your help with this, so how about we team up? The two stiffened and scanned their surroundings, nearly seeking a reason to flee. The first to answer was Iida. Midoriya, I appreciate the offer, but I'm afraid I'll have to decline. What? Why? Asked Izuku. Iida clarified, I see you as a rival as well as a friend. He gestured theatrically at Izuku and then jabbed a thumb at a group of Todoroki, Kaminari, and Yaoyorozu, saying, in order to grow more as a hero, I need to test my abilities against those who I call comrades, and that includes you, Midoriya. I'm going to join Todoroki's team now. Good luck. Iida ran to Todoroki's group before a frantic Izuku could scream. Izuku then turned to Uraraka, his final friend. He prayed in silence that she would stay. Uraraka made a lot of faces that were a mix of pouting and contemplating, as if she was mentally debating whether or not to accompany Izuku. At last, she made a sound that sounded like a groan and a sigh. According to Uraraka, yeah, I'll join, Deku. It's better to team up with friends than random strangers. Oh, thank goodness, interjected Izuku. That means so much, wow. Okay, now what about other teammates? It looks like nobody wants to be with me with such a large score on my head. Yeah, that's probably a reason why. Come on, Uraraka said, guiding Izuku through the tumultuous student body. There's gotta be someone willing to join with us. As additional teams formed, the crowd itself became thinner and thinner, and the two ducked in and out of it. Finally Uraraka gestured toward a lone girl. That girl. I saw her back during the race. Maybe she'll join up with us, Ochako responded. The two went up to the unidentified female. Izuku's first observation was of the girl's crosshair-shaped pupils. She quickly became a tech hero in Izuku's eyes thanks to her pink dreadlocks and the purported exosuit she was wearing. Great, his social anxiety was starting to set in. Hi, I'm Izuku Midoriya, he said. WW, would you like join our team? The girl's eyes squinted as though she was attempting to identify something about the boy. The girl asked gleefully, hey, you're the flying boy who won the race, aren't you? And the guy with the 10 million point bounty on his head? To which Izuku said, yes. She cheerfully introduced herself, saying, hey, cool. Name's Mei Hatsume. I'm from the support department. I build stuff for heroes to beat up stuff with. Here, you wanna hold my baby? Ochako and Izuku both cried out, what? Before Hatsume thrust a machine into Izuku's arms. Hatsume pointed to the exo-suit she had constructed, saying, yeah, it's basically a propulsion system that lets you rocket yourself over 10 meters. It works really well with this exo-suit I made. Lets anyone jump across a bridge or several rooftops without breaking their legs. Oh, by the way, I need that back. She removed it as fast as she had placed it in Izuku's arms. She narrowed her eyes and reached into her pockets for a screwdriver to tighten something. Izuku exclaimed, wow, that's really cool, before remembering. But why do you call your inventions your babies? Hatsume snorted at the question and looked up. Well, I made them. That makes me like their mom. Honestly, I don't see why more people don't call their creations their babies. Uraraka shrugged at the explanation. Okay, she said. So, do you want to join our team or not? Yeah, sure. Izuku questioned, really? Even with everyone going after us? Yeah, I need to get to the third event to show them what I can do. Plus, you're my best bet to getting there. Who's them? The support companies, shouted Hatsume, gesturing to the audience. There are always some representatives scouting hero school events like us. Once they see what me and my babies can do, I'm going to have opportunities left and right. Izuku nodded in agreement, a little taken aback by how much of a sensation the sports festival is to hero students in every profession. Izuku remarked, well, welcome aboard, Hatsume. Now, let's try and find a fourth. After some searching, the three of them finally located Tokiyami. Both the sentient Shadowhawk Quirk and the bird-headed pupil consented to participate. Before the race started, the four talked about their plans. Every team formed a line, facing one another. Izuku and his teammates wore the legendary 10 million point headband. Uraraka and Hatsume were in the rear for assistance, while Tokiyami was leading the charge. Izuku glanced at the other teams in the area. Bakugo was staring directly at Izuku and already had a team. Iida was among the group led by Todoroki. The Monoma guy from 1B was there, looking incredibly arrogant. Izuku remembered Shinso, the purple-haired child from the corridor. Children from various classes made up Shinso's team. But everyone, with the exception of Shinso, appeared dead-eyed and laser-focused. Strange. When the man shouted, go, almost every squad rushed in Izuku's direction. Present Mike gave the countdown. Fantastic, exactly how they had intended. Izuku tore off the 10 million point headband and tossed it into the crowd as the teams approached. The teams scurried after the headband, grabbing it frantically like sharks. However, it consistently whiffed around their hands despite their best efforts to grasp it. Presenter Mike said from the booth, holy moly. What a start, Team Midorya has turned the 10 million points into a free-for-all. I can't even tell WHO has it or not. Maybe if you paid more attention to the event than commentating, you would have been able to see what is actually going on. Aizawa continued. Present Mike muttered to his co-host, hey, man, not when we're live, before resuming his typical, i.e., boisterous, speaking tone. So, what's the 411 on that headband, Eraserhead? Aizawa apologized inaudibly before answering. Look how it always moves out of the way of whoever's trying to grab it. Uh-huh. And look at how it has most teams all centered in one big area. Uh-huh. And look at Midoriya's hand. People who abruptly looked at the green-haired telekinetic could notice that Izuku's left hand moved rhythmically, matching the movements of the headband. Even as their squad walked along the boundaries, the boy's gaze never left it. So, that means, introduced Present Mike. Eraserhead said, the 10 million point headband is bait on a string. And Midoriya is the fisherman. Some of the teams were now focusing on other teams instead of the 10 million points. And soon long, Izuku's crew was targeted by someone. The blonde's yell of wrath was a clear indication that this was Bakugo's crew. Izuku yelled, oh man, move, just before the groups clashed. Hatsume's jetpack, one of the numerous things she took with her, helped Team Midoriya avoid Team Bakugo's attempt to steal their headbands. Nevertheless, Bakugo continued to target them with bombs. To stop the onslaught, Tokiyami summoned Dark Shadow. But, scorched by the brightness, the sentient Kurik flinched away from the blast. Dark Shadow's defense was breached by Bakugo's subsequent onslaught. Izuku was so burned by the heat and smoke that he lost focus. Izuku just managed to grab the 10 million point headband once more before telekinetically tossing it away from the throng of competitors. Nevertheless, Team Bakugo continued to pursue them in spite of this. Izuku yelled, "Hastume, Uraraka, give us some room." Uraraka responded, "Okay, let's do this," and then used her quirk on Hatsume, Tokiyami, and herself. After saying, "Got it. Watch this," the inventor clicked her boots together. Before flaring to ignition, the sound of tiny jets roared. With the help of Uraraka's zero gravity, the team took off. Present Mike said that Team Todoroki had won the 10 million point headband before anyone could follow them. Thankfully, this made Bakugo reevaluate his priorities and charge at Todoroki's team, which allowed Midoriya and his teammates to catch their breath. Therefore, it was time for Team Midoriya to implement the following phase of their strategy. Izuku's telekinesis was primarily used to pluck off headbands and dodge the crowd in an attempt to obtain the 10 million points. This was easier said than done because Izuku had to deal with the problem of safely taking off the headbands in addition to trying to maintain his focus while moving around. Although it was simple to snatch a headband and jerk it off someone, Izuku discovered that this was neither sporty nor elegant. When Izuku attempted to remove one of their headbands, the girl with the large hands discovered. If her teammates hadn't caught her, the poor girl would have hit the ground hard after her head was pulled with such force. Izuku first yelled, "Sorry," and then tied the stolen headband to his head. It became evident that Team Midoriya's plan would not hold out as the cavalry combat continued. It would take too long to telekinetically remove the opponent's headbands without attempting to harm the rider, particularly if more teams learned about Midoriya's strategy. It was difficult enough to get near enough to grab headbands. The most chaotic hit-and-run tactic imaginable is created when quirks are added. But the 10 million point headband was the major prize. It was hard for anyone to try to take it after Todoroki's squad got their hands on it. It was made more difficult by Ida's speed and Todoroki's ice. However, that did not imply that they always had it. The headband would alternate between the two squads when Bakugo's team occasionally stole it. In one instance, it fell into Mineta's team's hands, where it was held for 4 seconds before the headband was removed. Team Midoriya was not looking good by this point, and the clock was ticking away. In between attempting to prevent their headbands from being stolen, they had only been able to obtain a few low-scoring headbands. If they wanted to guarantee a spot in the top 4 in advance, they needed that 10 million point headband. Team Midoriya implemented their last-ditch strategy with just a few minutes remaining. The 10 million point headband was currently in Bakugo's possession, and Todoroki's squad was working quickly to retrieve it. At that moment, Team Midoriya took action. They hurried over to where the other two teams were. As a diversion, Tokiyami called forth Dark Shadow. Bakugo's blasts and Todoroki's ice both hit the quirk. The smoke produced would blind Bakugo long enough for Izuku to accept the 10 million point headband, even though it did scream in agony from the explosion. Izuku understood they would have to play defense for what time remained, even as the gang hurried out of the fray. As before, Team Midoriya wore Hastume's jet boots and Uraraka's zero gravity to escape, carrying the headband over and fastening it. When Izuku heard it, they went on the defense. The roaring sound of motors changing gears. Izuku hardly noticed. Ida's calves were ejecting flames. Izuku was relieved that he had not blinked since he would not have noticed Ida running directly in their direction. He would only have heard the name of the move. Recipro burst. Ida carried Team Todoroki toward Midoriya faster than anyone could see. Todoroki took the 10 million point headband from him, but he didn't even feel it. He had it in an instant, and then it was gone. Izuku looked back at the location of Team Todoroki's wind-up. They had made their way directly to the arena's other side. But Ida's tremendous maneuver forced his engines to stall. They were passive objects. Izuku urged, "We can do this, let's go." Now, Team Todoroki was motionless as Team Midoriya rushed in their direction. Naturally, they had no intention of allowing Team Midoriya to deprive them of points. Everything was thrown at them by Team Todoroki, including rubber pellets, ice, and lightning. The attack was thwarted by Dark Shadow, the primary defensive element. Any projectiles that strayed were dealt with by Izuku. Before flinching and shifting to the left, Team Midoriya began to move toward Todoroki's right. Izuku observed that Todoroki only made ice with his right side for the entire event. Midoriya wanted to use Todoroki's left side as a vulnerability, but for some reason, he never exploited it. Team Bakugo was also charging in at the same moment. Targeting Todoroki's weakest side was the identical strategy used by both teams. Team Bakugo and Team Midoriya were now in a painfully close battle to pursue Todoroki, who had an increasingly nervous expression on his face. Izuku was almost arrived. He was really near. Until a peculiar surge of heat hit him. FWOOSH. From Todoroki came a huge column of fire. The two charging squads hardly moved aside. It attracted attention. The abrupt flames caused almost everyone in the stadium to freeze, and it vanished as swiftly as it appeared. Team Izuku was trembling. They had escaped without getting burned after almost being in the middle of a barbecue. But Izuku was the most frightened. The headband had slipped away in the flames, just as he had been about to get it. Furthermore, there wouldn't be enough time for a redo because the contest was almost ended. In his left brain, he sensed something slippery. Izuku lifted it to reveal a headband that had been stolen from Todoroki. Performed that recollection become jostled in the middle of the flame's frenzy, or was it something he performed instinctively? In any event, Izuku hurried to see how many points it had in the hopes of earning the 10 million. Unfortunately, such was not the case. Another one with a lower value. The battle was over when the timer sounded, before any new strategy could be devised. To count his team's points, Izuku got down his horse and gathered around them. Uraraka hoped they would get by. Tokiyami did not express a firm opinion. Hastung was eagerly awaiting the tallying of all the scores. Todoroki's team won first place. Despite Ida's stall, they managed to hold onto the 10 million points till the very end. Todoroki did not participate in the festivities even at that time. He continued to gaze with a look of disgust at his left hand. Bakugo's squad finished second. Bakugo was furious about losing first position again, while the majority of his team was applauding. Remarkably, Izuku's team finished third. As it happens, Tokiyami was able to use Dark Shadow to steal an additional headband from Todoroki's crew. For that, the group had a little party of their own. Additionally, the final squad to pass came from an unexpected direction. The purple-haired guy from General Studies was from Team Shinso. After the announcement, he left his team with composure. He said something like, "Thanks for the help," and walked away. The rest of the squad appeared to awaken from their reverie as he left and started to reflect on what had transpired. When Midnight announced the closing ceremony for this fight, everyone turned to listen to the sound of her whip. She reassured those who were unable to attend and congratulated those who did. Before the final event, a one-on-one fighting contest began. There would be a little respite for leisurely games. Izuku was unfazed by the midday break. It was wonderful to just play games without having to worry about fierce competition. When he was younger, he always wanted to go but was always unable to do so due to various situations. Around that time, money would be scarce, entry tickets would sell out fast, or there would be another event taking place at the same time. He was enjoying himself immensely now, playing games and spending time with pals. He could just have fun, yet the next event was always in the back of his mind. Izuku noticed that he had received texts during the limited period he had been able to carry his phone since the start of the sports festival. His mother sent him a barrage of texts, from wishing him luck to congratulating him on winning the obstacle race and completing the first two events. In a brief message, Izuku thanked his mother for her help. Izuku looked at the second message he received after receiving another text message wishing him success. "Dad. I've been observing you during the festival, champ. I'm pleased with your progress. I'll attempt to speak once it's finished. I adore you." Izuku wiped the tear he didn't realize he had and felt something moist. He rarely, if ever, had the opportunity to see his father. He was never at home because of his work in the United States. His only means of communication were video calls, which became less common with time, or SMS. Izuku now felt a kind of power and assurance that he hadn't experienced in a long time, knowing that his father was supporting him even though he was far away. Midoriya. Izuku jumped a little and almost fumbled his phone when his name was called. Turning, he saw Todoroki standing solemnly behind him. "Oh, hey Todoroki," commented Izuku. He trailed off. You can be really quiet when you want to." Todoroki's gaze became a little inquisitive. Was I interrupting something? "Oh, no, just reading a text from my dad. He's watching the festival from overseas, and he wanted me to know he was there for me." Before other ideas overtook him, Todoroki pondered that. Izuku was the first to break the hush. "You and your team were really great in the Calvary battle. You managed to hold onto the 10 million points the longest despite all the opposition. Plus, the fire attack nearly got all of us. I'm surprised you don't use it more often." Todoroki glared at his left hand and said, "That's the point. I shouldn't have used it at all." Izuku hesitated for a second. "Wait, I don't understand. What's wrong with the fire?" With a groan, Todoroki braced himself for whatever he would have to say. "You know my father is Endeavor, right? Yeah, the flame hero. Ranked number 2 in Japan and known for taking down the most villains in a year. Why? For the longest time, my father desired to be the number 1 hero. However, he came to realize he would never surpass All Might on his own. So instead, he decided to do something else. Todoroki's eyes were serious as he stared at Izuku. Do you know what quirk marriages are? Todoroki interrogated. Izuku stiffened. He was aware of quirk marriages. It was covered in almost all school courses on quirk history. Families who want for their offspring to have strong quirks organized quirk marriages. In order to marry off 2 people with sufficiently compatible quirks, they would hope that the child would have a quirk that was greater than the total of their quirks. Seldom did the families consider whether the husband and woman were genuinely compatible. Izuku replied, "Yeah, I know what they are. Aren't they illegal now?" Todoroki explained, "Not really. It's just not looked upon favorably anymore. Still, didn't stop my father from marrying my mother for her quirk." Izuku remained silent while Todoroki went on. "My father had fire. My mother had ice. My father wanted a child who could control both and be powerful enough to surpass All Might and be the number 1 hero when he could not. They had 3 children before having me. Every day was some form of training. Every day, I would be pushed to my limits again and again. No matter how much I pleaded, my father never saw me as his son. He saw me as his successor." Todoroki let out another sigh and turned his head away from Izuku. "By the time I was born, my parents' relationship was practically gone. There was no love in that house. Only obedience. It wore my mother down until one day she broke." Todoroki had vivid memories of the day. The kitchen, the water that was boiling, and the quiet while Shoto gazed into his mother's eyes. Then the flash appeared. The burning agony. His mother's cries that his left side was just a reminder of his father and everything he had done to them overshadowed the sobbing. By the end of the day, Shoto recalled that his older sister had to inform him that his mother was ill and needed to go to a facility to recover. Since that day, his mother has been in the mental institution. Izuku gazed with fear and awe at Todoroki's tale. "Oh my god, Todoroki. I never knew. I'm so sorry that happened to you." Izuku said something, but Todoroki disregarded it and continued. "From that day forward, I pledged to never use my left side. I wouldn't use his power to be a hero, and you made me break that promise." Izuku stifled a sarcastic remark about how Todoroki had to use his left side because Bakugo's teams were rushing him at the same time as him. According to Todoroki, "So, here's my pledge to you, Izuku Midoriya. I will win this tournament using only my right side. Nobody is making me use his power again. Not you, not my father, nor anyone else. Remember that." Todoroki stood up and left after saying that. He heard Izuku call out for him before he could get away completely. "Todoroki, I can't imagine going through what you did, but that doesn't mean I won't let you win easily. I will be putting my all into this event. I hope you will too." Todoroki glanced back for a moment, then turned and left. Izuku looked at the clock and realized he had to prepare for the commencement of the last event. For the last event, all of the participants lined up. When the audience saw the potential heroes of the future, they cheered and roared. The entire affair had a sense of spectacle that Izuku had never fully understood until now, thanks to the bright lights and camera. Midnight went over the regulations as usual. Students always engaged in a one-on-one tournament fight as the third event. The only thing that had changed was the situation. At the event last year, students engaged in combat with one another using pool noodles in addition to their quirk. But it was a straight-up one-on-one battle this year. An unpretentious battle tournament. The guidelines were straightforward. Battle your opponent until they were defeated. This can include just keying an opponent, forcing them to surrender the match, or knocking them out of bounds. Although they never explained what going too far meant, there was, of course, the obvious caution against being too harsh on an opponent. Perhaps they assumed that these children would be able to exercise self-control. A voice yelled before Midnight had finished, "I would like to withdraw." Izuku and the others turned to see the tailed youngster, Ojiro, standing resolutely. Midnight questioned, "And why would want to do such a thing?" Ojiro responded, "Because I didn't get here on my own free will. I have barely any recollection of my participation in the Calvary battle. One minute I was trying to find a team, and the next the event was over. And it was all because of his quirk." Ojiro gestured to Shinso, the child with the purple hair, who appeared unconcerned by his charge. "I understand how important the sports festival is, but I can't go any further knowing I didn't do any of the work myself. Call it pride, but I see it as protecting my dignity as a hero." He was urged to reverse his withdrawal by a few participants, but it was too late. Ojiro had made up his mind. I know walking away from an opportunity like this is foolish. I get that, Ojiro said, but how I can go on and show everyone my best when I couldn't do that in the first place? Another former Team Shinso member took the initiative to declare his intention to withdraw. Like Ojiro, the man from 1B made a similar point. No one else attempted to drop out, save for those two. Midnight let the two to withdraw from the competition, appearing to be very fine with it. They were replaced by two pupils from 1B who were on the fifth highest scoring team. Izuku thought about the whole thing. In that case, what would he do? For the sake of his pride, would he forfeit his opportunity to compete? Or, even if he had no control over his own behavior, would he have still complied? Unfortunately, Midnight's announcement of the first round brackets put an end to this reflection on the relationship between sports games and dignity. Izuku was in the first match by chance. In opposition to Shinso, of all people. Izuku looked at the boy with the purple hair. He gave Izuku a disdainful, almost resentful glance. Uraraka nudged Izuku, and Shinso turned away. She said, Deku, look, I'm up against Bakugo, with a nervous edge to her voice. In fact, Bakugo faced Uraraka in the opening round. As for the explosive child himself, he gazed bewilderedly up at his opponent's photo. Bakugo raised his voice and asked, who the hell is Ochako? Ochako murmured, Serialzy? To Izuku, he doesn't even know my name. We've been classmates for over a month. Izuku said, yeah, he usually just remembers nicknames. I'm pretty sure he doesn't remember any of the kids' names back in middle school. Ochako whimpered a little, fearing that Bakugo might fight him. Izuku and Shinso prepared themselves in opposing locker rooms while Midnight ordered the others out to their observation rooms. Izuku was in the corridor formulating his plan when Ojiro showed there. Izuku said, oh, hey Ojiro, what's up? Listen, I think I know how Shinso is able to brainwash people, Ojiro stated. I remember him coming up to me and asking me if I wanted to join his team. I was going to say no, but as soon as I answered him, I was under his control. It felt like my body was moving on its own while I couldn't do anything to stop it. I only broke free after the match when I bumped into somebody. Izuku jotted down all of this in his mind. Shinso's quirk controlled the user by responding to their query verbally. Making significant physical contact or using Shinso himself were the only ways to escape. The safest course of action would be to ignore everything Shinso says because none of those alternatives were accessible in a one-on-one match. One question remained. Izuku asked, why tell me any of this? The reason, Ojiro said, because I don't want that jerk to win. What kind of scumbag mind controls people to work for him? Anyways, you got this, Midoriya. We'll be routing for you. Ojiro hurried off, leaving Izuku to prepare by himself. The telekinetic found himself thinking about what the tailed boy had said. Why would Shinso manipulate his colleague's thoughts? Was he truly so immoral? Did he have to take matters into his own hands because he was afraid no one would take him? In any event, the gleaming light indicated that Izuku was ready to enter the arena. The arena's design was straightforward. A stage made of concrete with lines around the edges. Midnight was the referee, standing on an elevated platform. The audience was already roaring enthusiastically as Izuku entered. From behind him came a cacophony of voices he knew well. Class 1A was in their own observation deck, cheering and waving at Izuku when he looked up and turned around. Izuku gave them a smile in return before turning to face Shinso. The child gazed at him, comfortable and with weary eyes. Izuku saw the resemblance to Eraserhead. From the commentator's box, Present Mike exclaimed, okay, the first match is about to start. On our left, it's 1A's psychic powerhouse, Izuku Midoriya. And on our right, the underdog from General Studies who came out of nowhere, Hitoshi Shinso. Alright, boys, remember the rules. Fight and give the audience a good time, shouted Midnight. When one of you can't fight anymore, the match is over. You get knocked out of bounds. The fight is over. You want to say uncle, you're out. Go all out but don't be too brutal. Or else I'll have to punish you, she said with an angry voice. Shinso and Izuku both nodded in accord. With a loud blare, the contest started once Midnight gave the all clear. Shinso remained at ease as Izuku moved into a combat position. Shinso said, so, what are you going to do? Fling me out of bounds with your quirk? I bet it would be so easy for you, wouldn't it? Izuku remained silent. He was aware that Shinso was not to be trusted. However, why would he be offering suggestions on how to defeat him? I mean, with a quirk like yours, is this even a challenge? Do you think it's a game to you? Everyone else is just stepping stones to your victory, right? Izuku frowned in response to Shinso's charges. Was he implying that getting to Izuku would be easy? To get there, he and his pals had to fight hard. Why does he believe they coasted through this whole situation? Izuku scooted a bit closer to Shinso, still on his guard. I mean, at least you weren't like those two losers who dropped out. What kind of self-righteousness idiot quits one of the biggest sports events ever for something so dumb as heroic dignity? Izuku was unable to control himself and began to rush Shinso before abruptly, hey, that's not. Gotcha. Izuku stopped. His stance reverted to a stoic, straight position as his rage subsided. Shinso grinned since he had total power over Izuku. The words, ha, 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 made Shinso laugh to himself. Man, if that's all it takes to rile hero students up, then this tournament is going to be a breeze. The lack of activity had already caused the throng to get restless. The reason why Izuku abruptly stopped in his tracks became unclear. Shinso began to approach the frozen Izuku, saying, you know, you're lucky to have the quirk you do. It's strong, powerful, and heroic. I bet the moment you got it, everybody wanted you to be a hero. There was resentment in Shinso's remarks as she said, you know what happened when I got my quirk? Everyone told me I was going to be a villain. Nobody gave me a chance. Nobody thought I could do anything except be a villain. You ever been in a situation like that? Where everybody is against you because of what you have instead of who you are? Izuku's mental control prevented him from responding to Shinso's rhetorical inquiry. Shinso laughed and said, that's what I thought, but I was going to prove everyone wrong. I was going to be a hero and get into UA's hero course. The only problem is that UA uses robots as their entry test. They don't care about useful quirks, they just want flashy quirks that get attention. Well, I'm here to prove them wrong. I'm going to win this tournament and get in the hero course no matter what. I'll show everybody on who can be a hero. After concluding his tirade, Shinso let out a sigh. Well, it was great talking to you, but I've got a tournament to win. So do me a favor and walk out of bounds. Shinso gave the command. Izuku's body spun around and began to move robotically in the direction of the line. Izuku's students were shouting for him to stop this, turn around, and fight back. The audience was eagerly anticipating an exciting event, a throw, a punch, anything other than this. Shinso smiled as it happened just as he was ready to win for the first time. Izuku paused. He came to a complete stop. His legs trembled, as though they were stuck to the ground while trying to walk ahead. Shinso started to worry. His brainwashing had never been rejected before. Shinso said, hey, I didn't tell you to stop, keep going. However, it had little impact. Izuku remained still. The tremors had gotten worse, as though his body were resisting Shinso's command. The audience had already grown enthralled and was eager to see how things would turn out. Shinso rushed to confront Izuku. What are you doing? You are under my control, and I order you to go out of bounds. What are you even? When Shinso finally met Izuku, he gasped. He had been trembling all over, as if possessed. Izuku's eyes quickly dilated and then closed again. He breathed quickly and silently, hardly making a sound. Additionally, blood started to drip from his nose. What in the hell? Izuku jumped right in before Shinso had even finished asking the question. With a sneer on his face, Izuku drew his arm back and slammed it into Shinso's stomach. The telekinetically boosted punch sent the child flying before he could even predict it. After flying over the stage, the child landed hard on the floor and rolled away in agony. Shinso had left the ring by the time he halted. Present Mike declared, Hitoshi Shinso is out of bounds. The winner is Izuku Midoriya, instead. Both the audience and the student spectators erupted in cheers. But Midoriya only stood there, trembling like a tremor. Staff eventually called for Metabots to transport the two of them to Recovery Girl after Izuku collapsed and passed out. That day, the park was particularly lovely. There was a steady, low ringing throughout the air. Children chased one another while running around the playground and climbing up and down the playsets. A swarm of children gathered around a single boy. A few months previously, young Katsuki Bakugo received his quirk, which he was now proudly displaying to the other 4-year-olds. The crackling bursts the child conjured from his hand astounded them. Katsuki was already bragging about using his quirk to become the #1 hero. But there was always one boy who accompanied Katsuki wherever he went. A young, animated voice called out, Kachan! Kachan! From a distance. Katsuki turned to look at Izuku Midoriya, his friend. Katsuki smiled as the child ran toward the gathering. Izuku went to have his quirk examined a few days ago, according to his mother. He was curious about the kind of quirk Deku possessed. The child halted in front of the throng and gazed at his pal with excitement. Katsuki said, "Well, Deku, didn't you go to the quirk doctor? Come on, show us your quirk, Deku." Izuku paused to re-energize himself. "Okay, so you know how my mommy can move stuff towards her with her mind?" Izuku responded. "Yeah, and? Well, Izuku searched before settling on it. "Watch this." Izuku furrowed his brow and focused. Two toy trucks nearby started to rise off the ground and float for a while. Before the vehicles were placed on the ground, many of the children in the area let out a gasp of surprise. The obvious was yelled out by one of the children. "Izuku can move things with his mind." The other children were bouncing around, discussing Izuku's new quirk with great excitement. Katsuki even shared his thoughts on the matter. "Yeah, it's cool and all, but my quirk is going to be the strongest and I'm going to be the best hero out there." "I know, but I'm going to be right there with you. We'll both be the best heroes," Izuku replied with a childlike gleeful smile. Katsuki gave a snort. "No way, I'll be number one, and you can be my sidekick." "Ah, come on." As always, the two joked about it and carried on playing. Izuku would be right behind Bakugo, who would be in the lead. For years to come, their relationship will be strengthened by their joint ambition to become the greatest heroes. "I wish this had truly occurred." Izuku attempted to sit up and moaned. Breathing through his nostrils seemed difficult, and his head was pounding. He removed the bleeding tissues and tossed them aside when he noticed the two plugs. Recovery Girl was attracted to his stirring. She said, "Oh, you're awake. How are you feeling, dearie?" "I'm okay," said Izuku. "My head kind of hurts, but nothing else besides that." Thought the youthful heroine. "Well, in that case, do try to take it easier from now on. I don't want you making a habit of visiting my offices after every match." "Yes, ma'am. By the way, how long was I out?" "For a while, honey. You've missed a couple of matches, but if you take it easy, you'll be able to return before the first round is over." Izuku responded, "Oh," with disappointment. "So, do you have an idea of what happened to me out there?" Recovery Girl gave Izuku a questioning glance. "You don't fully recall. I had assumed you overtaxed your quirk trying to break the effects of young Shinso's quirk. Is that not what happened?" Izuku shook his head to clarify, "I don't really remember. Felt like my head was clouded. Where is Shinso anyway? I'd like to talk with him." Recovery Girl pointed to a bed on the other side and said, "He's over there, recovering. You did a number on that boy. Nothing permanent, but he's going to be feeling it for a while." Izuku winced and stood up. "I want to talk to him for a bit, then can I go back to my class?" After examining him closely, Recovery Girl sighed. Yes, as long as you don't faint, you'll be able to return to your friends." "Thank you." Izuku walked towards Shinso. The youngster was recuperating while resting in bed. The boy glared when he saw Izuku coming. Shinso asked, "What are you here for?" "Coming to gloat on how you beat me." Izuku wanted to respond, but he held back because he was afraid Shinso might use his quirk. Shinso declared, "I'm not going to brainwash you again. I already lost, so what's the point?" Izuku exhaled deeply. "Look, I just wanted to say that I'm sorry for hurting you like that." Shinso arched a perplexed eyebrow. Thanks. I know I said some nasty stuff about your friends, but I didn't totally mean it. I just wanted you to let me use my quirk on you. So, no hard feelings, I guess." "Yeah," Izuku said cautiously. "Hey, I remember some of the stuff you said to me, while I was brainwashed, and I wanted to say that I understand it." "What?" "I mean, I was never called a villain, but I know what it's like to have a dream be rejected by everyone around you." Shinso said, "Oh." He reclined on his pillow and thought about what Izuku had said. When Izuku said, "Plus, I think your quirk's pretty good for hero work," Shinso's thoughts were disrupted. "I mean, you'd be really great at negotiations. All you'd have to do is get a villain to answer your question and then you'd make them surrender." "Yeah," Shinso said after giving it some thought before his misgivings returned. "Too bad that won't matter. I lost my chance at getting into the hero course. That doesn't mean the end of your hero career. There were a bunch of pro heroes watching our match. There's bound to be some of them who took notice of how powerful your quirk is. It's not like I broke through it immediately." At Izuku's remark, Shinso exhaled and then slowly stood up. He sighed, "Yeah, whatever. You really think I might have a chance to join the hero course, even after I lost?" "I believe so," Izuku said with a nod. "Anyway, sorry to cut this short, but I want to go see the rest of the matches. Bye." Izuku heard Shinso yell for him as he turned to go. He looked over at his old rival. Hey, Midoriya, make sure not to lose. If I won't give up on my dream, you'd better not either. I will, said Izuku. Shinso was met with praises and appreciation when he later returned to his class. The majority of the general studies students were pleased to see someone from their degree achieve this level of success. A few even revealed that they overheard pro-heroes discussing Shinso and his quirk. Izuku must have been correct. Izuku reflected about his fantasy as he moved along the corridors. He still remembers enough to be troubled by it, despite the fact that it was receding. Izuku had vivid memories of that day. He had no quirk, therefore he was unable to display one. Bakugo never implied that they were among the greatest heroes. He simply dubbed Izuku a worthless Deku, and caused him to be roughed up by the other children. Why alter it if this was simply his brain reciting a memory? Easy desire fulfillment. What may have happened if Izuku had simply received his quirk? His quirk is funny. How easily he thought of those phrases astounded Izuku. His quirk. He finally achieved something he had always dreamed of, due to an underground crystal. He got this power, this quirk, from that gem. Was it a quirk at all? After all, when Izuku was resisting the mind control, something did feel strange. He felt as though something else was fending it off. However, what? Izuku gave a headshake. There are too many unanswerable questions. In addition, he was here to win a sporting event and have fun. Surely it can't be something too serious. Although Izuku arrived in time to see the battle between Yaoyorozu and Tokiyami, it was regrettably brief as Dark Shadow defeated Yaoyorozu. Izuku received a summary of the previous bouts while he waited for the next one. Shiro and Todoroki barely engaged in combat during their match. Shiro tried, but Todoroki easily defeated the tape boy. Still feeling the chill of the freezing ice, Shiro remarked, "Dude dropped a glacier on me. What was I supposed to do?" One of the pupils from Class 1B, Shiozaki, confronted Kaminari. Shiozaki's plant hair rendered the electric boy's quirk useless. Hatsume and Iida followed. It would be dishonest to call that a match. With Iida serving as an example of how to use the girl's ideas, it was mostly an advertisement for Hatsume. The girl eventually gave up on her own initiative, content with her sales presentation and leaving Iida feeling humiliated. Mina slid past Aoyama's naval laser with ease before his quirk backfired. Aoyama's belt would then be effortlessly melted by the acid girl, rendering him unconscious. Izuku then sees Kirishima and his opponent enter the stage. His opponent was a boy named Tetsutsu, who was also a contestant from 1B. After the fight started, Izuku noticed how similar their personalities were in addition to their quirks. With an outer layer shell, both brothers' quirks increased their strength and protection. Tetsutsu's was more like steel, whereas Kirishima's more rough. They appeared to be evenly matched and were both violent fighters. As in, quite evenly matched. It was almost strange how similar their fighting techniques were. Perhaps, Izuku thought, they were secretly linked. Izuku saw Uraraka's anxiety increasing as the battle continued. She eventually walked out into the corridor, and Izuku trailed behind. Taking the girl by surprise, Izuku said, "Hey Uraraka, are you nervous?" Uraraka squeaked, "Nervous? Me, nervous? About what? That I'm going against the most aggressive guy in our class who not only make massive explosions but yells, 'Die!' Every time he does. Yeah, I'm a little nervous. Add the fact that this match might make or break my hero career with nearly every pro hero in the country watching. More than a little nervous. Oh, right, dumb question. Hey, you think your parents are cheering you on right now? I know mine are. I don't doubt it. It's just there's a lot at stake, and I really don't want to let them down." Izuku paused, his face contorted in contemplation, and said, "I'm sure you'll do great out there. Me, you, all of us have been getting stronger. Hey, if you want any advice on how to beat Kachan, just say so. I've known him since forever, so I know how he thinks and how he fights." Izuku was shocked to hear Uraraka's response. "Thanks for the offer, but I'll pass." Before he could inquire as to why, she went on. "You're not the only one paying attention to our classmates. Besides, I've got something planned for Bakugo." Uraraka gestured for Izuku to come along. "Hey, thanks for the encouragement, but come on. I'm really hoping Kirishima wins." Izuku trailed behind and returned to the observation booth. As it happened, Kirishima lost. Not even Tetsutsu. The bout was declared a tie because both lads actually knocked each other out. Following their respective recoveries in the final bout of the first round, they did affirm that the two would play a non-fighting tiebreaker. The match started once Uraraka and Bakugo entered the arena and everything was set up again. Bakugo was charged by Uraraka. This, Izuku believed, was a good idea. Put Bakugo on the defense by being the aggressor. But in addition to keeping Uraraka at bay, Bakugo's blasts gradually weakened her. Izuku's hands were on the support rail as he stood along the observation deck railing. He saw as Bakugo gradually gained the upper hand and resisted Uraraka's waning attacks with strength and firmness. After taking explosion after explosion, the girl was obviously having trouble. In this confrontation between David and Goliath, David lost. The crowd was starting to grow disenchanted with Bakugo's persistent attack by this point. They began jeering at him, accusing him of being a villain, and pleading with him to lessen his assaults so the girl would have a chance. These doubters were refuted by Eraserhead, who claimed Bakugo had no justification for self-control during combat. Heroes are meant to always give it their all, after all. Would Bakugo's self-control demonstrate that he did despise Uraraka instead of recognizing his opponent's strength? Izuku struggled with it. He was half in agreement with Aizawa's logic. This was consistent with his personal history with Bakugo. Bakugo always pushed himself to the edge and beyond, in spite of his ego and rage. Without ever holding himself back, he gave it his all and kept becoming better. However, this was an absolutely amazing sports event. There was no real life or death conflict here. Nevertheless, Bakugo was here, never letting up, never pulling punches, and never showing pity to his prey. Izuku's head was overflowing with memories of Bakugo violently abusing him. Unless Katsuki himself became bored or a teacher approached, Izuku could never persuade Bakugo to give in, no matter how many times he pleaded. Was that Kachan putting me down because he could, or was he recognizing my strength? As he gripped the railing more tightly, the question lingered in his mind. It appeared like the match was already over by this point. Burned, buried, and exhausted, Uraraka had done very little to harm Bakugo. It appeared to be the end. Izuku watched Uraraka begin to touch her fingertips together. Her gravitational quirk was abolished when she brought all 10 fingers together. However, what happened to the objects she touched? Izuku gasped as he glanced up over the arena. Concrete rocks hung in the air like threads, floating above. Izuku grinned and said that was her goal. Uraraka would turn off the gravity on all the debris that Bakugo's blasts released as she led him to strike her. In fact, Katsuki provided Ochako with the ammunition she needed to beat him. The rubble fell when Uraraka tapped her fingers together. Like an approaching meteor shower, it fell. The trap was ideal. Bakugo couldn't possibly avoid them all. Uraraka could float him up and push him out of bounds with a single tap, even if he could. Izuku grinned. It was this. Bakugo refused to back down. He threw his arms up to the falling rubble and let out a huge blast. The arena was filled with smoke. In anticipation, the audience became agitated. Bakugo stood there, unhurt, while the smoke cleared. The enormous concrete rocks all around him have been reduced to little, innocuous stones. His heart fell, Izuku thought. Uraraka's scheme didn't work. Bakugo started to approach, and Izuku noticed Uraraka's unsteadiness. At last, she collapsed to her knees. She struggled to stand up and fight back in spite of all the beatings and the nausea. Izuku tightened his hold on the railing until his knuckles were white. Uraraka collapsed and fainted before Bakugo could deliver a final strike. Izuku was so absorbed in the action that he was startled by the slight tapping on his shoulder. When he turned around, Sato was staring at him with worry. The boy said, "Midoriya, man, are you okay? 'Cause you're kinda," while gesturing to Izuku's hands. Izuku swiftly released his grip on the railing as he noticed where Sato was pointing. The metal was twisted and crushed from where he was gripping the rails. Izuku's gaze shifted to his hands. He could never have accomplished this on his own. While watching the match, did he unintentionally use his telekinetic strength? Izuku tried to calm his breathing and closed his eyes. This has never occurred before, thus it cannot be beginning at this time. His emotions cannot be causing him to lose control of his abilities. Not with everything he had to do. Izuku opened his eyes and regulated his breathing. Izuku remarked, "Thanks for checking on me, Sato. I guess I got really invested in that match to check on my quirk." Sato answered, "Yeah, man, I don't blame you. That match was rough. You think we can get Smintos to fix that up during a break?" "Maybe. Hey, I gotta go prepare for my match with Todoroki. See ya." Sato shouted, okay, to the Izuku who was leaving. Just be back to see Kirishima's tiebreaker. As he moved along the hallways, Izuku disregarded Sato's query. Somewhere, hopefully, he'll be able to catch Uraraka. Izuku walked past the recovery room and went to the waiting areas. Izuku heard sniffling and halted as he approached. He peered inside and saw Uraraka shaking with every cry. Izuku was uncomfortable. He wanted to go console his friend, but he was unsure of the appropriate way to do it. However, Izuku had no choice but to go into the waiting room to visit Uraraka after a mistake made her aware of her presence. Ochako saw him when he looked up. She tried to put on a stern look, but her eyes were beginning to flush from crying. Ochako said, "Hey, Deku," and wiped her face. "Hi," said Izuku. Both of them were present in the waiting area, looking as uncomfortable as possible. "So, I thought you did a great job out there," Izuku blurted out, breaking the quiet. "That was a really smart move using Kachan's own quirk and aggression to create that big meteor shower. You think you're going to name that move?" Ochako let out a sigh. "Yeah, it was smart, but it failed. Bakugo was just too strong." A second sigh. "What do you do when you give it your all, and you still don't win?" Ochako addressed the question herself, so Izuku was hesitant to respond. "It means I blew it. I failed. I failed myself, my classmates, my teachers, and..." Ochako's phone rang in the midst of her tirade. Izuku glanced at the name, Dad, shown on the screen. She placed the phone away and hastily muted it. With solemnity, Akaku concluded, "And even my parents." Izuku sat down beside her. They sat silently while Izuku considered his next words. "Uraraka, I think you did really great out there, even if you didn't win," Izuku stated. "What?" inquired Ochako. "I mean it, and I bet your parents think you did too. Kachan was never going to be an easy opponent to go up against. Yet, you actually managed to nearly trap him. Besides, isn't this what being a hero student is all about? We give our best, and if we fail, we learn and do better." Ochako looked at Izuku almost incredulously. Then she smiled slightly, her mouth curving. "Wow, you really do pay too much attention at All Might's speeches." Izuku said, "Yep," and then he rose from the bench. "Hey, when you're ready, I think Kirishima's about to have his tiebreaker match." The same caller ID appeared on Ochako's phone when it rang again. Ochako responded, "I'll be there shortly," and then he turned to Izuku. "Thanks for the kind words." Izuku returned the smile and walked away. He heard Ochako and her father conversing as he got out. Kirishima and Tetsutsu were in the middle of their tiebreaker match when Izuku and Ochako returned to the observation deck. In order to decide who advances, tiebreakers typically entail competition in some other way besides fighting. Arm wrestling was the style used during this encounter. The two fought fiercely, one arm of hardened flesh and one arm of steel, two powerful forces battling it out with all of their might. After a few drawn-out minutes, Kirishima finally overcame his opponent and defeated him. After that arm wrestling match, Izuku was fairly certain the two were buddies. It was time for the second round after Kirishima emerged victorious in his arm wrestling encounter. Izuku vs. Todoroki was the opening match. Izuku was making his way down the hallway to his waiting room to get ready. "Izuku Midoriya," he was called by a deep voice. Izuku looked across at the flame hero Endeavor. The man was standing along the wall with his arms folded. He was much taller than Izuku, and his solemn countenance was framed by the flames that constituted his beard and hair. Izuku wanted to perspire even if he was unable to sense Endeavor's heat. The number 2 hero remarked, "Your quirk is rather impressive, something so simple, and yet so powerful. Despite falling under the Shinso boy's quirk, you managed to overpower it and defeat him quite soundly." Stuttering, "Thank you, Endeavor," Izuku said. "From what I hear, when you're not throwing objects around with your quirk, you fight similarly to All Might, correct? Strength and durability to overwhelm an opponent. All Might is my favorite hero, sir, so I like to take some inspiration from him on how I fight." Izuku could infer that Endeavor was making some mental connections, but his posture remained unchanged. Izuku was about to reply when Endeavor said, "I know my boy, Shoto, has already conversed with you. I don't care what he told you, but know this. Shoto will replace All Might as the number 1 hero. He has this childish notion that he can become a hero with only half of his power. You will provide a good opportunity to break that idea and make him see that using my fire will be the only way to fulfill his destiny. And what if I don't get him to use his other half?" What then? Izuku put forward. Then I was wrong about your potential. I am usually not wrong about these sorts of things, Endeavor continued, warningly. Eventually, Shoto will recognize the folly of his decision. Only when he recognizes the true power of his quirk, then he will be able to become number one like he is meant to. Endeavor turned and walked away, leaving Izuku gaping in silent surprise. Izuku interrupted him before he could move too far away. Endeavor, sir, if you don't mind me saying this, Shoto's your son. He's allowed to be the hero he wants to be. Despite stopping, Endeavor did not turn around. Shoto is my legacy, that is all he must concern himself with. Endeavor replied. Then he turned to leave. Izuku thought about what he had said to the number 2 hero. Todoroki was somewhat correct, although Izuku was aware that the flame hero was never the friendliest or most sentimental hero in the world. The exchange revealed more about the true Endeavor's character behind the scenes. Endeavor used Shoto as a means of establishing his legacy. He was not concerned with Shoto as a son. He viewed Izuku as a means of persuading Todoroki to comply with the flame hero's commands. How can Izuku demonstrate to Shoto that he should be allowed to live his own life as a hero and that he should utilize his quirk to its fullest potential? Too many issues and not enough time to consider them. Izuku and Todoroki were now in the arena, facing one another. Izuku was completely unimpressed by Present Mike's and Eraserhead's commentary. The boy continued to stare at Todoroki. Nobody was as rigid and stern as the ice user. Izuku might have become exactly like Shoto if he had a father like Endeavor. Both guys nodded in accord with the regulations, and Izuku looked into Todoroki's uninterested eyes. Izuku pondered his approach to assisting Todoroki. He would only be giving Endeavor the advantage if he made Shoto employ his fire abilities. It would be a betrayal of his pledge to give this event his best if he threw the fight and lost just to Shoto's ice. As the play continued, Izuku blew air out of his nostrils and accepted that he would just have to figure it out. Begin, Todoroki remarked. This will be over quickly, and he launched a wave of ice from his right foot. When Izuku realized this, he quickly fled before the ice trail could get to him. Izuku observed the same glacier strategy that Todoroki had used on Zero now that they were in the air. Fortunately, the audience and his students were spared this time. Izuku could still feel the chill air coming from the glacier even though they were quite far away. Todoroki saw Izuku floating above him when he looked up. Izuku used this opportunity to try a superhero joke that was patented. Why you know if hero work doesn't work out, then maybe you could be, no wait, you should try ice sculpt. Straight for Izuku, Todoroki launched a wave of ice into the air. Izuku avoided ice's path, but it was not as dangerous as it was on the ground. Fantastic! Izuku's stuttering prevented Todoroki from finishing his remark in addition to allowing him to counterattack. Moreover, spontaneous quipping is challenging. How some heroes managed to do that without becoming speechless was beyond Izuku's comprehension. Todoroki realized at once that he had to defeat Izuku. He fired out multiple ice trails that exploded into massive pillars of ice instead of continuing to discharge ice into the air. Izuku avoided the ice spikes that rose and then landed on the ground. Todoroki could no longer hide behind the ice pillars, so Izuku had time to come up with a strategy. Izuku looked at the glacier Shoto had made. Well, Izuku thought, Todoroki can make ice. See if he can keep it under control. Izuku looked back at the enormous glacier. Two enormous sections of the slowly melting iceberg were split by his telekinetic action. Izuku hovered over the ice stalagmites, drawing them nearer to him. He waved his palm, sending one of the fragments hurtling in Todoroki's direction. To avoid being crushed by it, Todoroki made an ice road and slid on it. Like previously, Todoroki scooted out of the way to avoid Izuku's second projectile. Okay, the theory has been verified. Izuku pondered. Let's get near now. Another sizable part of the now melting glacier was ripped off by Izuku. He flung it down exactly where Todoroki stopped sliding after raising it well above his hands. Todoroki, unable to escape again, launched a bigger spike of ice up toward the falling fragment. Ice shards fell from the sky, shattering the big ice cube with the stalagmite. Izuku seized the chance to descend to the arena and head straight for Todoroki. Izuku was sufficiently distracted by the ice shards to get ready for a straight right fist. When Todoroki sensed that Izuku was about to commit an offense, he responded by applying solid ice to his left side. Izuku struck Todoroki's ice guard with his fist. Izuku winced when he punched solid ice, even though the telekinetic force field increased his power and stamina. The two engaged in combat, applying all of the principles they had been taught about hand-to-hand combat. The sound of a fist striking ice, a kick here, a punch there. Unable to penetrate Todoroki's ice armor, Izuku retreated to make room. Shoto took advantage of the situation and threw a wave of ice directly toward Izuku. Beyond his body, Izuku threw up a telekinetic barrier. Izuku was surrounded by a dome of ice after the ice struck the barrier and formed around it. Izuku shuddered. His barrier did not shield him from the cold, even though it might have shielded him from ice strikes. Izuku fought the cold by quickly expanding the barrier, breaking the ice and releasing the shards in a blast. The comparatively warmer air rushed over Izuku. He checked for blood by rubbing his nose, but there was none. Todoroki wasn't feeling well, but Izuku was. He could see his breath in spite of the warm weather, and a thin coating of frost was almost covering his right side. After considering Todoroki's condition, Izuku had a revelation. That's it. It's the disadvantage of his quirk. Izuku said. Todoroki possesses both ice and fire abilities. Each side controls the other. Todoroki must warm himself with his flames. Otherwise, he will freeze till he is immobile. The issue is, how can I persuade him to use the half of his authority that he despises? Izuku would either evade or employ the ice assaults as projectiles when Todoroki launched another wave of them. But Shoto was losing strength, and Izuku could see it. Over time, Todoroki's ice grew weaker and melted more quickly. Before it turned into a covering of ice, Todoroki's right arm and leg were covered with an increasing amount of frost. Todoroki was more exhausted, and his mobility seemed more difficult. His face and chest were covered in ice, and because he was immobile, he was hit more often. Todoroki, you can't keep going on like this. Izuku responded. You can either forfeit now, or you can use your fire if you want to beat me. I won't TT, Todoroki managed to mumble, gritting his teeth. YUCC can't ma make me. Izuku barely managed to escape the boy's next feeble ice attack, which missed the telekinetic by a considerable margin. Izuku yelled, look at yourself, Todoroki. You're freezing over, literally. Even you can see that fighting like this isn't the way to go. I told him like IAA already told you, expressed Todoroki. I will never use my left half. Izuku frowned. This cannot be Todoroki's seriousness. He is causing himself pain in order to adhere to his self-imposed rule. Izuku was aware that Shoto was intelligent enough to understand that he would not win a battle in his current state. Nevertheless, Todoroki persisted in trying to fight with just his right half. Izuku made the decision to stop. It was time to give his classmate some common sense. Izuku charged toward Todoroki and rained down a flurry of blows strengthened by telekinetics. Just enough to have the boy feel it, but not enough to really hurt Endeavor's son. Todoroki's defense was essentially worthless by this point. His limbs were too locked to move properly, and the accumulation of ice on his body did little to lessen the force of the strikes. Over the punches, Izuku yelled, don't you see it? Don't you see what your promise has led you to? Each and every one of us has gotten this far by using all of our talents. All of us pushing ourselves to the limits. Except you. You believe that you can be a hero with using only half of your quirk. By fighting with one hand tied behind your back. And look where it's gotten you. About to lose to your own quirk and somebody who was your match. Izuku delivered a forceful punch that sent Todoroki tumbling across the arena, close to the edge. Todoroki almost fell, but he caught himself. I've met your father, and I understand where you're coming from, Izuku replied. He's an arrogant, egotistical jerk who's too stubborn to think that any other way other than his is wrong. You say you're nothing like your father, but even without using his side, you're just like him. Something clicked inside Todoroki after that last remark. After a moment of shock, the child lowered his face. He twitched his left arm. I'm not my father, Todoroki exclaimed, causing a column of fire to erupt out of his left hand. Izuku just managed to sidestep. He felt the flames grazing his arm as the heat struck him like a locomotive. Grasping his extremely heated arm, Izuku snarled and turned to face Todoroki. The ice that had covered the boy had all vanished, turning to steam. Todoroki flexed his right arm once more while panting. Endeavor's loud shouting, which had this to say, momentarily stopped the match. Shoto, finally, you've used my gift, my power. Now, defeat this boy, and make our family proud. After acknowledging the number 2 hero's words for a little moment, the two boys turned their attention to one another. Why? Shoto inquired, pausing between sentences. You had to see that both sides of your quirk are yours, Izuku replied. You control the fire, not your father, not anyone. Shoto considered this before posing more questions. But why even try and push me towards that revelation? You had me at certain defeat. You could have easily taken the victory. Why try to help me? Izuku grinned. Because I promised to go through this festival with all of my power. To go beyond my limits. I hoped you would too, and I had to help you realize that. Shoto shook his head and laughed out loud. Todoroki was saying, Izuku Midoriya, you really are a strange guy. Shoto released another burst of flames. To avoid the flames, Izuku flew into the air. But even as Izuku dodged and swerved in the air, Todoroki's flame followed him around. Izuku eventually blocked the flames by erecting a barrier in front of himself. Izuku was sweating profusely from the heat, but the flames were bending around the barrier. Izuku swiftly descended to the arena after realizing he couldn't continue, tore 2 pieces of it, and hurled them at Todoroki. Todoroki could see the 2 approaching projectiles, but he had lost sight of Izuku due to the heat. To stop the concrete fragments, Todoroki made ice walls and extinguished the flame. Izuku was aware that he had to end this contest right now. Now that Todoroki had used both sides of his quirk, he was unable to battle him any longer. Low to the earth, Izuku took off. He formed an invisible gauntlet around his fist, concentrating almost all of his telekinetic power there. Similarly, Todoroki made an ice slide to confront his opponent directly. In his right hand, flames gathered. As they got ready to fight, both lads screamed with all their might. Time slowed for Izuku as the 2 approached contact. He saw the resolve in Todoroki's face. He could see the centimeter-long path of ice beneath him. As Todoroki's fist moved in for a punch, he noticed the flames encircling it. Izuku sensed that something was amiss at this very moment. He needed to be far away from whatever was going on. Izuku attempted to switch his strike to a telekinetic shove in the agonizingly brief moment before impact. Izuku didn't even realize he had moved until he noticed the fleeting flash of light beside him since it happened so slowly. Then there was just noise and rage. An enormous explosion shook the arena. Members of the audience protected themselves from the smoke and wind that were blowing in their direction. The trembling soon ended, and the smoke was all that remained. The crowd gathered with anticipation. They held their breath to find out the winner. They gasped as they saw the match's result as the smoke cleared. Through the starry emptiness, Izuku drifted. Still. Captured. Izuku saw flashes in front of his eyes. Of dreams, of recollections. Of both fictitious and actual occurrences. He witnessed life after life in these flashes, both of which were and weren't him. In the brutal sun, he was a slave. Gazing out over the snow-covered meadows, he was a prince. He was a young boy who had a camera perspective on the world. He was well-liked, an outsider, wealthy, impoverished, thriving, and barely surviving. And one thing remained constant among these vastly disparate lives. The thing, the authority. Some of the lives turned into gods, tails, or protectors. Others concealed their abilities. They all passed away eventually, fated. 3 youngsters were the last to live, and they fell, one by one. Lightning struck the first one. Like a ferocious predator, the second went insane with agony and was put down. The final boy just dwindled. Despite his might, the effects of time had caught up with him. They were visions. The item had an impact on the lives of these individuals. Their powers were identical. Izuku currently has the same one. In the distance, there was a single light. It was gloomy, and getting progressively darker. Izuku sensed that this one was different from the others. It wasn't human. Who are you? Izuku sensed the first light's feelings and ideas. It existed for as long as the Earth. It nourished itself on the young planet's natural resources. It was eventually buried beneath the planet's evolution. Those few who saw it would be touched as humanity rose. It would provide them with powers never before seen. It needed to be sustained because it wanted to live. It had traveled the world throughout the millennia, sustaining, providing, and feeding. But fewer and fewer people were finding it. With every movement, every touch, it had become weaker and weaker. When it offered its gift to those 3 lads, it believed it had died. Here it was in Japan now. As humanity began its own evolution, I was moved. Izuku was the last now. You want me to do what? Izuku, could you save it? No, it was aware that its time was up. The boy could not do anything else. However, it only wanted Izuku to use its power. Don't let this gift be forgotten. It didn't care whether it was good or bad. Make use of it. I can do that, all right. I wish to express my gratitude. You made it possible for me to realize my dream. If nothing else, could you tell me your name? It was from a time before names existed. It did, however, teach it the last name that humans gave it, Mogo. I'm grateful, Mogo. Use my gift and sow the seeds of the future, Izuku Midoriya. Izuku woke up with a moan. In the nurse's office, another match, another wake-up. He tried to sit up, squinting against the brightness. Recovery girl noticed Izuku stretching his extremely sore but unbruised muscles and went to see how he was doing. Izuku inquired, what happened? You and that Todoroki boy went all out right at the end. Managed to knock that boy out of bounds while you managed to stay in bounds. The young heroine clarified. Izuku started to absorb what she had said, but he was struck on the arm with a firm but gentle blow before he could do so. Ow! Exclaimed Izuku, massaging his arm. What was that for? Like an unruly pet, Recovery girl waved her needle cane at him and said, that was for pushing yourself too far, young man. Your right arm was covered in second-degree burns, your spine was used as an industrial shovel, and most of all, you overtaxed your quirk again. I know this competition is important to you, young man, but don't make it a habit of coming to my office after every match. Got it? Yes ma'am, was Izuku's prompt response. Hey, did you say I knocked Todoroki out of bounds? Yes, so I guess that means you won. Now rest up, dear. Izuku's face slowly lit up with a smile. He prevailed. He did win. Then his face fell. What must Todoroki be thinking? He lost because he forced himself to employ the aspect of himself that he detested. Izuku was confined to bed for the time being, but he wanted to go see how his friend was feeling. Recovery girl's return roused him from his daze. She told Izuku that Ochako, Sue, Iida, and Mineta were among his many guests. As they gathered around him, they congratulated him on a victory. Izuku responded, thanks, I'm serious. Wait, hey Iida, isn't your match up next? Why aren't you getting prepared? My match is postponed until the arena has been properly repaired, replied Iida. Ochako went on, to be fair, you and Todoroki really did a number on it. Izuku said, oh, sorry, in apology. Recovery girl ushered them out after they had been chatting for a while. Izuku took a nap, and soon after, he received the all-clear. Before returning to the observation room, Izuku wanted to visit Todoroki, but Recovery girl told him that Endeavor's kid had recovered and departed before Izuku did. Izuku eventually went for the observation room, quite disappointed. He was able to locate Todoroki there, but he received little to no attention. But Izuku thought Todoroki was lighter. As though his shoulders were lighter. After some time, the arena was fixed, and the bout started up again. They passed more quickly than Izuku's match. Shiozaki, the girl from 1B, and Iida faced off in the first bout. Iida defeated the Vine girl by charging at her and shoving her off the arena before she could respond. The idea of competing against his friend in the upcoming round made Izuku feel both proud and nervous. Ashido and Tokiyami faced off in the following match. Dark Shadow swiftly defeated Ashido, demonstrating its strength once more. The idea of taking on Tokiyami and his quirk made Izuku anxious. It was quick, powerful, and almost impregnable unless you possessed a quirk or something that could emit intense light. Bakugo and Kirishima faced each other in the final match. Kirishima's hardening initially appeared to be an effective barrier against Bakugo's blasts. But Bakugo put a lot of emphasis on going on the attack, leaving Kirishima with little time or space to maneuver. Kirishima was eventually beaten when his defenses failed. The semi-final round matches were revealed. It was Bakugo against Tokiyami and Izuku against Iida. Izuku and Iida spoke briefly while the arena was being set up. Hey, Iida, have you ever heard anything from your family yet? Izuku responded, I bet your brother is pretty excited to see you make it this far. Iida's expression was thoughtful. While I have gotten some messages from my parents, I haven't heard from Tensai yet. Of course, he is a pro hero after all. I'm sure he's stopping some villain or criminal. After all, a hero's work is a never-ending battle against evil. Yeah, Izuku said nonchalantly. Come on, we've got to prepare for our match. After Iida gave a nod, the two started walking in different directions. Both eventually faced one another in the arena. Their ears were filled with the cheers of the crowd, and their skin was bathed in the warm light of the sun. The fight started when the referee called it. Engines were already revving as Iida raced forward. Iida tried to push Izuku out of bounds faster than Izuku could blink. Each tried to push back against the other as they struggled with one another. Iida's engine torque clashed with Izuku's telekinetic mobility. Izuku pushed himself aside since he knew he couldn't keep up with Iida on solid ground. Izuku threw Iida away and hung in midair while Iida skidded to a stop. Izuku was aware that Iida was faster than he was, particularly on the ground. Izuku would have an uphill battle in close combat because Iida was taller and had longer limbs. Luckily, Izuku had a wider range of assaults and the resources to maintain his distance. Izuku fired blast after blast of telekinetic energy, but Iida sidestepped them and jumped into the air. He struck Izuku with a spinning kick that sent him tumbling to the ground.
Flinched Izuku. How were you able to dodge that?
Your hands, noted Iida. He was correct. Izuku guided the usage of his telekinesis with his hands. Iida was taking advantage of that tendency now. It seems that Ingenium's sibling was more perceptive than Izuku had assumed. Iida made a clicking noise and assumed a runner's stance. Though not as quickly as before, he still outran the ordinary person as he ran forward. Izuku made the decision to pursue a different tactic. Izuku excavated areas of the earth and raised them into the air. Iida used the now floating platforms as stepping stones without skipping a beat. Iida launched himself from the last platform, kicking Izuku in the head with an axe. He sidestepped, allowing Iida's foot to create fissures in the arena. Izuku seized the moment to charge in and start punching Iida repeatedly. Izuku delivered a final blow that caused Iida to stumble, and they were able to force Iida back. Izuku drifted a few feet above the ground after falling back. Izuku needed to lift Iida upward. Iida couldn't move around or alter his momentum as well as Izuku in the air if he used his speed to jump. Izuku tossed the previously torn pieces at Iida using telekinetics. Tenya dodged them, but Izuku was hit by a telekinetic explosion that knocked him to his back before he could kick him. He dropped into a runner's 4-point stance after rolling back up. After another change of direction, Iida vanished and charged directly toward Izuku. He turned to the side and ran in an arc before tacking at Izuku's side, or at least he was. Izuku ducked back, allowing Iida to slide over the ground and whiff. But before long, Tenya dashed back into position, confronting Izuku directly. Izuku looked over his shoulder. The boundary line was only a few feet from him. Iida was aware of it. The sound of shifting gears could be heard again, but this time it was accompanied by the well-known roar of an engine. With resolve in his expression, Iida adopted that runner's stance once more. Izuku stiffened. The only way to avoid this action, which he had seen before, was to move at the perfect moment. Recipro burst. Iida ran forward at breakneck speed. Any regular individual would have been caught off guard by Iida's speed. But Izuku had been bracing himself for this. Izuku utilized his telekinesis to leap and flip high enough to avoid Iida as he charged at him. Tenya could only watch as Izuku flew over him because he was unable to slow down or jump after him. Iida tried to turn and face his opponent, but his engines forced him to stop, and he skidded across the arena. Izuku gave a telekinetic push while floating upside down. Iida was pushed further away by this blast. The engine quirk youngster did not prevent himself from being pushed out of bounds, but he did manage to stay upright. Tenya Iida is out of bounds. Izuku Midoriya wins and moves to the final round. When Izuku lands upright, the audience applauds. Both males' expressions were surprised and shocked. Iida was taken aback by the result, and Izuku was pleased with how well his plan worked out. The expressions on both guys changed to ones of admiration. "I'll admit, Midoriya, that was a good match," Iida replied. "I didn't expect you to adapt to my speed so quickly." Izuku said, "Thanks, you did really good too. If I wasn't able to make that last-second dodge, you would have gotten me, no doubt about it." Iida gave a nod. "I'd hate to ask this of you Midoriya, but can you help me back to the observation deck? I'm stalled and still can't move my legs." "Oh," blanched Izuku, "I'll try and get you to recovery girl." Due to the boy's bulky frame and halted engine legs, Izuku was unable to physically take Iida to the nurse's office, hence his attempt to do so was unsuccessful. When Metabots showed up to lead Iida to the recovery chamber, this work was made easier. Izuku's injuries also required him to visit the nurse's office, mostly to heal any bruises, but nothing as bad as before. Naturally, this did not ease Izuku's fears of incurring the youthful heroine's wrath for violating his vow to avoid seeing her following each game. Fortunately, she was far more compliant, and after a little journey, Izuku and Iida went back to their classmates in the observation deck. Bakugo and Tokiyami faced off in the semifinal round's last match. Dark Shadow was harmed by Bakugo's explosions since they were sufficiently bright. Bakugo prevailed when Tokiyami gave up after several minutes of this assault and one crushing final move. Izuku was rooting for Tokiyami, but he secretly knew that Bakugo would be his opponent in the championship match. Bakugo did not want this to be on good terms, like a rivalry, as Izuku would have preferred. Every direct interaction with Kachan simply reminded Izuku of those agonizing and painful times. Back when he had no power and no quirks. It was intended that this would be different. For some reason, Bakugo continued to irritate him despite the fact that he possessed friends and abilities. Although the bullying wasn't as severe as it had been previously, Izuku's friends noted that this wasn't a healthy relationship. Izuku hoped that Bakugo would have come to his senses after their most recent altercation, making the boy acknowledge Izuku as a sort of equal, at least. However, Bakugo continued to despise Izuku, just as he did everyone else. It would be different this time. Izuku would demonstrate to him that he and his classmates were not to be despised, that Bakugo couldn't continue to pretend to be the main character in a shonen manga. He would have to acknowledge their power. He must. Izuku observed Iida rushing down the corridor as he was making his way to his waiting room. Iida never sprinted down the halls, so it was a worry. Not even a fast walk. "Hey, Iida, wait," snapped Izuku. "What's going?" "Sorry, Midoriya, I can't stay and talk right now," Iida replied. "I have to go. It's a family matter. Good luck." Iida then took off running. Izuku took note of Iida's tight, rushed tone. He was curious as to what was going on and how he might assist. However, Iida had already left, and Izuku had to prepare for his battle. Izuku was getting ready when he heard a door smash. Bakugo's already bad attitude got worse when he entered before spotting Izuku. Katsuki shouted, "What in hell are you doing in my waiting room?" Then Izuku's startled expression changed to one of perplexity. Izuku rattled to the room number. "What do you mean, your waiting room? Isn't your room on the other side?" Bakugo discovered he was in the wrong room after glancing at the locker numbers. He rushed for a locker that was empty. Izuku could hear a yell of, "Shit!" coming from inside the smoke despite the loud noise. Bakugo only gave Izuku a glare as the smoke cleared away. "I'm real pissed that you took out Icy Hot before I could," Bakugo replied. "I don't know what kind of bullshit luck you're pulling out of your ass, but I won't be taken down by you, Deku." Izuku refrained from slamming the door of his locker. "Isn't there anything you're supposed to be doing besides trying to put me down?" Bakugo seems unfazed by the jab. "No, I don't, because this festival was to show everyone my potential, my greatness. Now, all everyone's talking about is you, Icy Hot, and whatever extra won a match. Trust me, after this round, all everyone's going to see is me at number 1, and the rest of you in the trash where you belong. Is that seriously what you still think about yourself? That you're the only one destined for the top? That all of our classmates' achievements are just background noise to you? You really think you're just destined to win?" In all seriousness, Bakugo stated, "I don't think I am. I know I am. Take all the time you want. It won't help you. Just like Uraraka, I won't be holding back." Bakugo then walked out of the waiting area to locate his own. "You never do," said Izuku. He was fed up with Katsuki's demeanor. Izuku could now see Kachan for who he truly is, as if all the luster he had placed on his old friend had been removed. Izuku is aware that Katsuki possesses the willpower, the potent quirk, and the intelligence to employ it wisely, making him a potential great hero. He could only see himself, though. Unless they were obstructing him, he couldn't give a damn about anyone else. Katsuki wouldn't keep anything back in those situations. Izuku has witnessed it in all of Bakugo's matches, with Uraraka, and with himself. Bakugo needed a reality check from someone. Someone to prove he wasn't the only one who aspired to be the greatest. That there are people that share his motivation. And it appeared that Izuku would be that individual. Izuku's phone dinged with a notification as he completed the final steps of his preparations. Izuku maintained up with it as one of the news websites. Izuku slides the breaking news message, and the headline makes his eyes enlarge. Turbo Hero Ingenium critically injured after battle with Hero Killer. Izuku gaped. Iida's brother suffered severe injuries. He had to depart so abruptly for that reason. And Izuku's heart plummeted the more he perused the piece. The injuries were serious and perhaps fatal. Although Ingenium's condition was not explained in the report, it did note that he was being sent to the hospital for immediate medical attention. Izuku had to head to the stadium, as indicated by the buzzing light. Izuku closed the locker and turned off his phone. As a buddy, he wanted to support Iida by being there for him. That would have to wait, unfortunately. Izuku has to defeat an old acquaintance in the last round. As the last two competitors took the stage, the audience erupted in applause. Izuku Midoriya, the telekinetic underdog who has dazzled the crowd with his talent and quirk, was on one side. Katsuki Bakugo, the gifted explosive youth who had rapidly gained the audience's opinion as UA's weak point, was on the opposing side. Amid the applause and whispers of others, heroes were speculating about the outcome. Some people think Bakugo would win the final because to his sheer ferocity. Others believed that Izuku would win because of his telekinetic ability. Because they detest Bakugo so much, some people wanted Izuku to win. However, it was evident that everyone's thoughts were focused on this contest. As the last introduction was given, the two boys exchanged scowls. Beyond placing first, each youngster had a compelling motivation for wanting to win. Bakugo just wanted to establish himself as the new number one. He believed that Izuku had magically transformed from a helpless little geek to someone who had defeated the only person Bakugo could claim posed a danger to his authority. Bakugo was irritated at Izuku's progress. A weak little nerd who couldn't hold his own in a battle defeated him more than a year ago, despite the fact that this school and this event were part of everything he trained for. Bakugo is aware of Izuku's increased strength. The only other person Bakugo would consider a possible rival in this entire fucking school was defeated by that little runt. Bakugo, however, was confident he could defeat Deku. Because beneath all that telekinesis and swagger, Deku was still the same useless waste that had followed him since they were children. Bakugo also refused to let him relax for even a moment. Izuku, however, was determined to disprove Bakugo, because Bakugo's story did not include him or any of his classmates as supporting characters. Izuku had thought that this event would convince his old friend of that. But only Uraraka's match seems to have a slight impact on Bakugo's perspective. Izuku was able to convey his point well this time. Bakugo was physically superior to him since the explosive youngster only reacted to force. The two boys exchanged scowls. Izuku could hardly hear the well-known regulations being recited. Izuku and Bakugo waited for the contest to start after agreeing to the rules. Bakugo rushed forward as soon as the call was placed. He lifted his right arm in a striking position. Izuku has already raised his defenses and is ready to strike back. Izuku observed that Bakugo would always begin with the same attack. Is he really going to use the same tactic again? Izuku asked himself in his mind. He's already aware that I can refute that. Izuku saw the flames coming from Bakugo's palm as he approached. A huge explosion erupted in the arena a second later. The smoke forced Izuku back, blinding him. Izuku grimaced in discomfort from the heat, even if telekinesis had made him more durable. That struck more forcefully than he normally does. Is he going all out because of it? Izuku thought. Izuku glided back and then hit Bakugo with a telekinetic push. Bakugo made a speedy recovery and pushed himself ahead with an explosion behind him. Izuku also launched an onslaught. He was aware that being defensive was not enough. They continued to trade blows. Izuku tossed pieces of the arena that had been torn out toward Bakugo. Explosions from Bakugo ripped holes in the earth. After a series of kicks and punches, the two retreated, their bodies starting to bleed and bruise. Bakugo snarled. Damn it, Deku, start taking this seriously. He hurried over and hit. Izuku's senses were shaken by the explosions that accompanied each punch. Izuku released a shockwave under pressure, sending Bakugo and any little debris flying. However, Bakugo used explosives to cancel his speed and land safely in the arena, avoiding being sent out of limits. Seriously? Izuku asked, his annoyance growing. Do you still think that I'm not giving it my all? I don't think. I know you can hit harder than that. A huge explosion that was stronger than the ones he had been utilizing this round was released by Bakugo. This time, Izuku was ready and erected a large wall in front of himself. The smoke and heat were redirected and then dissipated. Bakugo screamed, "So, fight me with all you got," and ran wildly in Izuku's direction. Izuku then used telekinetics to seize Bakugo in the middle of his charge, hoisting him above his head before slamming him to the ground. With a groan, Katsuki fell to the ground, but he got back up and began charging an explosion in his hand. Izuku said, What is with you? With frustration. You never showed restraint in your life. Why? Because going all out is what a hero does, Deku. A hero never loses. A hero never holds back. I'm the only one who gets that, and it's time that I drill that into your shitty, dense, nerd head. Katsuki hurled the explosive charge ahead. There was heat and smoke in the arena. Bakugo discovered Izuku nowhere on the ground as the ashes turned clear. He looked up to see Izuku drifting with the fading smoke overhead. What do you know about being a hero? Izuku's voice had a harsh edge. Izuku sped in Bakugo's direction. Izuku struck the boy before he could react. Bakugo was pinned to the arena floor and saw Izuku's hand rising when he looked up. Izuku struck Bakugo in the side of the head with a punch, saying, "All you care about is beating the villain and nothing else. There's more to it than just fights. There's rescue work, protecting people, hell, just basic community service." Before Izuku seized Bakugo and threw him farther into the arena, each point was punctuated with a punch. Bakugo snarled as he landed on his feet. "But you hate all of that. You despise and demean every time it comes up. Because you don't get what being a hero is, Bakugo." Bakugo hardly displayed any signs of being upset over not being referred to by that juvenile moniker for the first time in years. Izuku said, "A hero is supposed to help others, to be their beacon of hope," as her voice became louder. "A hero isn't supposed to put down others because they are stronger. A hero isn't supposed to treat others like they're worthless. And a hero doesn't let someone think they can end it all and try again in the next life." Bakugo appeared to take notice of that final statement. The blonde appeared to genuinely struggle with the concepts and words that were presented to him. Izuku was aware that he had revealed something confidential. If that line ever got out, it may ruin Bakugo's hero career and create a lot of drama between the two. Izuku might have questioned how many people outside of Bakugo and himself heard his tirade. The two nearest to the arena, Smintos and Midnight. In the announcer booth, Eraserhead and Present Mike. Who in the crowd could hear the implications clearly enough to notice? Izuku was unconcerned. All he wanted was something, anything, to make Bakugo reconsider his actions. And he seems to have left his mark. Bakugo gritted his teeth and shook his head. "You think that little speech means anything? It means jack shit unless you can prove it. So, come on, fight me like you mean it. Go all out, do it." Izuku's expression gradually changed from one of astonishment and dismay to one of icy resolve. Izuku asked in a strangely steady voice, "You want me to go all out? Fine, I'll show you all out." Izuku raised his hands in a grasping gesture and lowered his arms. There was an earthquake-like tremor in the arena. The folks in the grandstand could feel these rumblings that went beyond the arena. Bakugo's expression changed to one of concern because even he was unable to predict what Izuku was up to. When Izuku lifted his arms, the arena burst into flames. Innumerable chunks and fragments of concrete hovered in the air. Like gray diamonds, they drifted through the air. Bakugo's face changed to a prepared one. This appeared to him to be Uraraka's strategy for defeating him, albeit on a far grander scale. Izuku flung his arms together and shouted. At that moment, all of the concrete flew at Bakugo at breakneck speed. When Bakugo attempted to detonate, the shards were too swift and soon engulfed him. Around Katsuki, the concrete gathered and created a cocoon, exposing only his face. Bakugo fought to break free, but Izuku applied more pressure the harder he tried. Bakugo's skin was being eroded by the concrete. Bakugo attempted to escape, but his ability to use his quirk was hindered by the continuous pressure and suffering of his concrete coffin. By this point, Bakugo's attempts to escape had broken flesh with the shards, and blood was now leaking from his cocoon's cracks. Izuku ignored the warm sensation of blood trickling down from his nose and took a tentative step forward. He kept going until he was near his opponent who was stuck. "Yield," Izuku replied, his voice strained. Bakugo glanced at Izuku below. His expression was one of both agony and resolve. "Never," Bakugo declared boldly. Izuku raised the Bakugo cocoon higher into the air, his aggravation reaching a breaking point. When he was high enough, Izuku slammed him as hard as he could against the ground using telekinetics. Izuku lifted him up and found that Bakugo was still conscious, albeit confused. Izuku started hitting Bakugo into the arena repeatedly as a result of this. He launched one last blow, a slam so strong it cracked the concrete shell above Bakugo. Bakugo lay still on the arena floor as the dust cleared. Did Bakugo simply lose consciousness? Izuku's head was ringing, but he couldn't tell. To check on Bakugo's condition, Midnight called out to him. When he remained still, she pronounced Izuku the victor and declared Bakugo incapable of fighting. Izuku stood there as the audience's applause swept over him. He was too psychologically and physically worn out to properly comprehend what had transpired. The medical personnel brought a bleeding Izuku with them when they arrived to pick up Bakugo, and the Izuku collapsed into their arms, disoriented and dizzy. Smintos started repairing the arena for the awards event as they were leaving. He and Midnight exchanged worried glances about the previous altercation. Katsuki, Izuku, and whatever past those two lads may have had that led to such a duel. To give Bakugo and Midoriya time to recover, the awards event was postponed. Izuku was lucky to be able to ignore her tirade about abusing his quirk because of his fatigue and the effects of Recovery Girl's quirk. The two guys were back on their feet and prepared for the awards ceremony in no time. Originally an Olympic-style awards pedestal, the arena had been converted. For first place, Izuku occupied the tallest pedestal. He was simultaneously anxious and giddy. He never took first place in any physical competition. Therefore, for him, winning not only a sporting event but one that is so highly valued was quite different. All Izuku could do was timidly gesture to the spectators in the stands. Bakugo was on the pedestal in second position. He still had bandages on his hands to aid in their recovery from all the cement fragments that were piercing him. The most concerning aspect of Bakugo, however, was his quiet nature. He didn't scream or flail about like a crazed beast. He was, still, thinking. Izuku was conflicted about his old friend. On the one hand, he was happy to demonstrate his value and ultimately shatter Kachan's ego. On the other hand, he thought he ought to try to assist his classmate. But his rational side told him to stop provoking him and to leave him alone. Tokiyami stood on the larger podium for third place. The user of the shadow quirk stood there stoically, attempting to look cool. Because both were seen as finishing in third place, the pedestal itself was made larger for those who lost the semifinal rounds. However, only Tokiyami attended the awards because Iida abruptly left. Midnight gave the first-year event's final remarks. The primary focus of her speech was the effort the children put forth to get to this point. When she introduced All Might and presented the medals, things didn't go as planned because both heroes fumbled their questions and essentially interrupted one another. However, before approaching the stage, All Might blusterily showed the medals to the crowd. He gave Tokiyami a bronze medal when he initially stopped by. The boy received some counsel from All Might to help him avoid depending on Dark Shadow. To accept his medal, Tokiyami lowered his head and nodded. Bakugo is then given the silver medal by All Might. The boy's fighting prowess was commended by the number one hero, who also urged him to practice his more violent inclinations. He went on to say that the hero student shouldn't let the fact that he only placed second deter him from pursuing his dream. Bakugo simply kept his head down and didn't even answer. As All Might attempted to wrap the silver medal around Bakugo's neck without getting stung, his perpetual smile grew a little more strained. Then, at last, he brought the gold medal to Izuku. Young Midoriya, you have grown from a boy with a dream to a young man who has the means to make that dream a reality. The display you gave us at this festival shows your skill with your quirk along with your morals. Keep this up, always keep pushing forward, and I promise you will be among the greatest heroes this country has ever known, All Might said with a lower pitch. I'm proud of you, young Midoriya, as a hero and a teacher. Those months training were some of the best moments of my career. Thank you for reminding me that anyone is fit to be a hero, quirk or no quirk. Whispering back, I have to thank you, All Might, Izuku said. Without you, I would never dreamed of being a hero, and I wouldn't have gotten this far without your training. All Might teased, quit it. You're gonna make me cry. To allow All Might to place the gold medal around his head, Izuku bent his head. Placing his palm on the golden medal, he felt it and looked deep into its mirrored surface. As the ceremony came to an end, All Might exclaimed, "Ladies and gentlemen, the next generation of heroes." Thousands of voices cheered from the crowd. Izuku raised his head and gestured to the crowd. The waterworks were approaching, and he scolded himself for breaking down in tears while watching TV. Nothing, however, could dampen Izuku's cheerful disposition. Having won the sports festival and gained popular admiration, he is now demonstrating his strength to his old friend. This positive moment could not be ruined. Damn it, I wanted him to lose. Angrily, Shigaraki slammed his good hand against the table. He was quite irritated by the turn of events, having just watched the sports festival conclusion. He wanted to crush the child into dust even more after the tiny green brat who shattered his arm won. Under the pretense of observing his adversary's abilities, Shigaraki's master persuaded him to watch the festival even though he didn't want to participate. Shigaraki appeared uninterested during the tournament, but he couldn't help but find some amusement in watching kids fight. Shigaraki's arm was sufficiently recovered by this point that a sling was no longer necessary. However, it still required a cast, which had long been Torma's scratching post. Kurogiri responded, "I apologize," as he was wiping down a nearby glass. "However, it seems we need to keep an eye on the one called Midoriya. He may prove a problem in the future." The speaker said, "Alternatively, he may prove to be a valued asset," from another television. Only sound could be heard, there was no picture. "The boy has shown to be quite skillful with his quirk. And do you plan to take his quirk? It is a possibility, though I would prefer if he would join us willingly." "Master, you think this Midoriya kid would work with us? He's nothing but a goody two-shoes," said Shigaraki. "On the surface, yes. But I suspect there is more to the boy than meets the eye." "What do you mean, Master? Remember, my reach is far and wide. I have eyes and ears in many places within this dreadful hero society. I was able to procure the Midoriya boy's medical records." Kurogiri and Shigaraki remained silent as their master spoke. Ever since he took his quirk emergence test, Izuku Midoriya has been classified as quirkless for the past 10 years. That is until 11 months ago, where he was listed with a telekinesis quirk. Shigaraki questioned, "Was this your doing, Master?" AFO replied, "No, and that is what intrigues me." The elderly criminal was intrigued by the revelation. Only he possessed the ability to grant and take quirks throughout his life. Either an unidentified source gave the boy his quirk, or someone persuaded the Midoriyas to keep it a secret for years. Inquisitive and observant, Kurogiri inquired, "What are your plans with the Midoriya boy, my master?" "From what I have seen, he does not seem inclined to deviate from the side of the heroes." Shigaraki intervened, "I agree with Kurogiri, Master. Midoriya appears to be the type of person who exclusively selects good karma options." "What about the other child, the one who placed second?" "I believe you are referring to Katsuki Bakugo, young Master Torma." "That guy, indeed. Have you heard his fighting style? 'Die,' and 'I'll kill you,' are not words that the heroes will tolerate in their ranks for very long." As he considered his apprentice's decision, AFO hummed, "Young Bakugo does have some potential. Maybe. My master, do you want to convert both kids?" Kurogiri's shadowed eyebrow went up. AFO responded, "It is a possibility, though tougher than just taking one to our side. They have a history, and the most recent encounter was not pleasant. Before they can fight together, we will need to work on each of them separately if we do bring them to us." "What about our inside mole?" Shigaraki inquired eagerly. "Our tiny spy will stay in his current location. The heroes are unaware that there is a traitor among them." AFO stopped before continuing, "How has recruitment gone for our little league, As long as we don't draw any attention to it, there will be nothing to connect him to us." Quote. Kurogiri replied sadly, "It has not been good, Master. Every villain and 2-bit criminal believes we are garbage ever since the USJ raid." With rage, Shigaraki added, "If the league itself cannot draw in any members, then perhaps we might need to find someone else we can associate with and draw in more people." AFO thought. Kurogiri remarked, "Master, I might have someone like that in mind." "Go ahead." Stain, a vigilante, has been the subject of recent reports. He has been going for and killing a lot of heroes in cities all around the nation. The term, hero killer, has been applied to him because of his conduct. AFO thought, "That guy sounds like my kind of guy. Do you know where our hero killer is located?" Quote. His most recent assault, which left multiple people dead and one critically injured, occurred in Hosu City. "Most likely, he is hiding." AFO said, "Very well," after a pause. "Find Stain in Hosu City, Kurogiri, Tamura. Try to get him to come with us, and if that doesn't work, bring him here so I can talk to him." "Yes, Master," Shigaraki replied. Kurogiri replied, "Understood," and then went on, "When would you like us to depart?" Quote. "After this call is over, get ready and leave. This search can take some time if he is indeed hiding." "What about the rest of our plans?" Alongside the Nomu, with excitement, Shigaraki inquired. "Tamura, have patience. The Nomu won't be completely ready for a few weeks, according to the good doctor." When they're prepared, I'll let you know, and then we can decide what to do next. Shigaraki said, "Thank you, my master," with a courteous bow. He had an inner drive. Shigaraki is eager for him and his master to demonstrate to the world what it means to be a villain. After dinner at the restaurant, Hisashi Midoriya went back to his apartment to try to watch the rest of the sports festival. It was late into the night here in America, and he spent a good part of the event trying not to fall asleep, but he was glad to have managed it. He watched, in real time, his son win one of the most prestigious sports events in recent history, and it would be an understatement to say that he was filled with pride and love. All Hisashi had to do now was close his eyes and let sleep take him. He wished he could get on the phone right now and congratulate his son, but his body needed sleep. As he grew older, he was unable to pull in all-nighters as he used to, so he sent his wife a message saying they would arrange a video call later tomorrow and went to bed. Ring, ring, ring. His eyes snapped open at the sound of his phone, and he snatched it up, hoping it was a scammer so he could turn it off and sleep. Hisashi sat up straight, fighting the bright glare of his phone and the dim light of his apartment, as he read the number on his screen. His employer was the one. "Hello, Mr. Continuum, sir," he said quickly, holding the phone up to his ear. Quote, "Hello, isn't this Hisashi Midoriya?" said the deep voice on the other end of the line. "Yes, sir, I am he. Additionally, are you linked to Izuku Midoriya?" Quote, "Yes, sir, I'm his father." Mr. Continuum went on to say, "Well, let me be the first to congratulate him. That boy of yours did wonderfully in the sports festival. He must make you very proud." "Yes, sir, I am. Thank you. Mr. How lately have you been to see your family, Midoriya?" Quote, "Sir, a long time has passed. Not to the extent I'd like. You know, it hasn't been as simple as I had planned because of the rising costs of international travel." Hisashi held his breath, wondering what the mysterious CEO was thinking, as the voice on the other end of the line fell silent for a time. "How about this, Mr. Midoriya?" Mr. Continuum's voice came back, "We'll pay for your journey to see your family. What does that sound like?" Quote. Hisashi's jaw fell open. Mr. Hisashi stumbled. "Continuum, sir, this is so unexpected. I recognize that this appears to be a unique chance. However, please understand that this is not merely a random act of kindness. Mr. Midoriya, you have demonstrated that you are a devoted and diligent worker. This is something you deserve. You get it." Quote, "Yes, sir, I do. And, Mr. Continuum, I want to thank you for this wonderful chance." Before Mr. Continuum started up again, Hisashi could only hear a hum coming from the other line. "I won't keep you long because I know it's late where you are. If you'd like, we can talk about additional specifics in the morning." Hisashi automatically replied, Sure, certainly," before continuing, Pardon me, Mr. Continuum, how long do you want this trip to last?" Quote. Mr. Continuum replied, "However long you need it to be, 2 weeks. A month. The length of time is up to you." Since this employment was essentially the Midoriya's main source of money, Hisashi would have liked to claim that he wanted to return home permanently and be with his family in person. However, he had to make this work. Hisashi replied, "A month would suffice. Thank you, Mr. Midoriya, for your time. Get some sleep now so you'll be prepared for tomorrow. For you, we'll arrange and complete everything," Mr. Continuum replied. "Thank you so much, Mr. Continuum, for this. I owe you money. That is not how it should be viewed. I only ask that you guide your son in the correct direction. Believe me, if Izuku Midoriya is a hero, then everyone benefits. Salutations, Mr. Midoriya." The call ended before Hisashi could answer, and his mind was racing. He had a lot to process, and he was finally returning home to see his family after a long absence. However, everything seemed strange. Why was Izuku suddenly of interest? The sports festival had just ended, and the CEO, who had never met Hisashi or been his supervisor, asked him to leave. In addition, there was the all expenses paid deal, which was an incentive to get Hisashi back to Japan. Why? He wasn't a manager or supervisor, so he wasn't a manager or supervisor. What did Mr. Continuum want from Izuku? Eventually, Hisashi texted his wife to tell her that they needed to talk tomorrow and to put the phone down. He then sat in bed, hoping to close his eyes and go to sleep, but he lay there for an unknown amount of time because all the questions, all the excitement, and all that tense nervous energy prevented Hisashi from falling asleep. The 2 days off following the conclusion of the sports festival were much needed by Izuku. During the remainder of the festival, he couldn't expect to sit in class. And he had to sleep. He had been able to experience a new kind of mental tiredness from his matches throughout the festival. Nevertheless, watching the second and third years participate in their own tournaments while remaining at home was entertaining. He was the winner this year rather than only a spectator, yet it was still like old times watching the festival at home with his mother. Izuku's life could never be easy, of course. During the break, his mother sat him down and informed him that his father would be returning home for a prearranged month-long visit. To put it mildly, that was unexpected. Izuku hardly recalls living at home with his father. He primarily recalls seeing his father on a video call, through a screen. If there was a deep-seated cynical part of him that believed he would never again meet his father in person, he would be lying. That the man fled to America while pretending to be a overseas employee. However, he is actually returning home. For a month just, but it's a beginning. Why now is the main question Izuku had. Why is his father finally able to return home after all these years? Was his victory at the sports festival the reason? Was his dad able to spend the time and money returning to Japan because of a promotion at his job? Or was there another factor at play here? Izuku was unable to obtain his answers until his father arrived in Japan. Izuku began to realize the significance of the sports festival to the general public when classes resumed. He used to commute to and from school as just another face in the crowd. It seems that Izuku Midoriya was always acknowledged as the sports festival champion. He was greeted by lines of people who congratulated him on his victory, praised his cool and powerful quirk, and said he had a bright future. Izuku found the change from an ordinary child to the talk of the town to be completely strange. It had begun to storm by the time he got off the train. He trudged through the downpour, keeping his umbrella close at hand. He even created a small game out of it by pushing the puddles that were developing aside with his telekinesis. When he finally reached Ua, he recognized a face. "Uraraka!" exclaimed Izuku. Waving from beneath her own umbrella was the Gravity Girl. They gathered at the gates of the school. In response, Uraraka said, "Hey there, Deku. So, how does it feel to be the winner of the sports festival?" "Strange, to say the least. Everywhere I go, there's always someone who recognizes me and tells me how they were hoping I would make it. Yeah, I feel you. That happened on my ride here, plus back home. I got congratulated not only by my parents, but my neighbors, family friends, heck some of my old classmates too. Man, do you think we'll keep getting situations like this? Getting recognized on the street for being heroes?" Izuku responded. "I don't know. I'm hoping that I get to keep at least some kind of secret identity when I go pro," replied Ochako. They were drawn to the sound of brisk footsteps on the lake. When Midoriya and Uraraka realized who was approaching, their eyes brightened. Ochako and Izuku yelled, "Iida!" to their companion. The class vice representative strode in wearing a bright yellow hat and raincoat. If he hadn't been walking at that speed, it wouldn't have been as comical. Iida said, "Hello Midoriya and Uraraka. We mustn't be lollygagging. We've got to make it in on time." Uraraka said, "Iida, we have 5 minutes before the bell. A student must always strive to arrive early. It shows dedication. Now, come on." Iida ran off. Both Ochako and Izuku exchanged worried glances. This was Iida's method of concealing the fact that he was still in pain from what had happened to his brother. Iida led the two inside. Izuku said while they were drying off, "Hey, Iida, we heard about your brother, and we want to say." Iida hurriedly answered, "I understand and thank you," before shifting the topic. "And Midoriya, congratulations on winning the sports festival tournament. I commemorate you on your skills and sportsmanship." "Oh, thanks Iida, it's just," Uraraka went on, "we're here for you, okay? If there's anything you want to talk to us about, whether it's your brother or whatnot, we'll listen." "Okay." Tension crumpled Iida's face. He seemed to be experiencing a whirlpool of feelings that he was unable to comprehend. Tenya relaxed his face and let out a sigh. "Thank you. As for my brother, he's alive, and my family is very thankful for that. It's just..." Tenya hesitated. The words were stuck in his throat for him. He felt conflicted. Although he didn't want his pals to worry about him, he wanted to tell them everything. He had to deal with his problems, his family, and his circumstances. Iida shook his head, swallowing the words. "Never mind. Now, come on, we have to ready for class," Iida replied. He left Izuku and Ochako behind and headed for the 1A classroom. The two exchanged glances. They were aware that they couldn't force Iida to divulge anything he was holding to himself. They were forced to wait for him to let them in. Furthermore, who can predict how long that would take? The impact of the sports festival continued long after it had ended. On the walk to school, Izuku's classmates talked among themselves about getting identified by onlookers. It appeared that everyone now knew who Class 1A was. When Aizawa walked in, the room became quiet. The hero of erasure alerted his students about their heroics class. With the sports festival over, it is now time for you all to move on towards another important step in your hero careers. The students waited suspensefully and in quiet. You need to choose hero names. As students discussed giving themselves authentic hero names, the room was alive with conversation. Aizawa's stare interrupted this. You will need to choose this because in the coming weeks, you will all go on your first hero internship programs. Your performance in the sports festival has shown your skills and abilities so far, and some of you have managed to capture the attention of the pros. Aizawa displayed a chart listing every internship offer that the 1A students had received. It would be an understatement to suggest that it was unbalanced. With more than 6,000 offers, Midoriya had the most. Todoroki, who had 2,000 less, came in second. Bakugo trailed behind Todoroki by 1,000 bids. Tokiyami's proposals, which were far lower than the first three, followed. Tokiyami was in the 300s, whereas Bakugo was in the 3,000 range. As students moved down the list, the gap between them was less than that between the top three. Each student received fewer offers as they moved down the list. Some students received no offers at all, and by the end, it had dwindled to single-digit offers. Kaminari said, "Hey, Mr. Aizawa," and held up his hand. Is this whole chart a little skewed? With a dry response, Aizawa said, "Yes, you're right." Aizawa indicated the three with the most offers, saying, "Normally, internship offers are more evenly spread out among the class, but it seems that these three caught the most eyes on them." The sheer volume of pros who appeared interested in granting an internship made Izuku flush. Bakugo sneered at being eclipsed by both Todoroki and Midoriya, while Todoroki seemed unconcerned by the amount he received. Some of you may have noticed that not everyone has received offers. Regardless, you all will spend 1 week interning with a pro hero or agency. There is no substitute assignment, and if you fail to find a hero to intern with, we will provide you one. The majority of the class received that subliminal message. Now, before you choose internships, you must first choose your hero names. Aizawa went on, "Remember, this is the name the public is going to know you by. Do not think of something on a whim. Put some actual thought and effort in it, because if you don't, then you're going to have hell to pay." With a shout, Midnight burst through the door, making a theatrical entry. Dryly, Aizawa inquired, "How long have you been waiting outside for?" Midnight responded succinctly, "Long enough," and turned to face the pupils. Like Eraserhead said, these hero names are going to be the name the public will recognize you as. What he neglected to mention is that these names tend to stick, especially any embarrassing ones. So, in order for you all to choose the best hero names you could possibly have, I will be here in order to give feedback. Jiro said, What about Mr. Aizawa?" As he began to zip up his sleeping bag, Aizawa replied, "I don't care. Just don't choose something dumb." Midnight asked, "Any last words of advice on choosing hero names for your students, Eraserhead?" Aizawa appeared to contemplate for a bit while staring off into space. Then he made a straightforward comment in response. "Don't let your friends choose your hero names for you." Eraserhead wrapped his polyester cocoon around himself and fell asleep. Izuku and the other students in his class then started coming up with ideas for hero names. Even though Izuku considered this when he pictured himself as a hero, he was now at a loss. He hadn't had time to sit down and consider his hero name because he had been too preoccupied with training, the sports festival, and school. Perhaps he ought to center his hero persona around his abilities. Psionic or Cerebro, perhaps. No, they didn't describe Izuku as he is, instead, they described what he could do. "I Cannot Stop Twinkling" was Aoyama's hero name, and it was shortened to "Can't Stop Twinkling" at Midnight's request. More students gained confidence when giving their names as a result of Aoyama's example. Midnight denied Ishido's application of the name, Alien Queen, since it resembled the monster from the well-known science fiction film. Froppy was the first name that Sue revealed that had not been altered. Hiroshimaz Red Riot, was modeled off an older, Crimson Riot, pro-hero. Midnight did warn that if they wanted to leave their names as a legacy to other pro-heroes, they would have to live up to the expectations of those pros. Izuku was reminded of his early years by the reference to legacy heroes. In his fantasies at the time, he was a hero much influenced by All Might. It's safe to say that he had moved past that point. He voluntarily forfeited the opportunity to succeed All Might in order to become a hero with his own strength. He had a special power that he wasn't born with, provided to him in a special way. All Might did, however, claim that his quirk was special because it could be inherited. What if All Might's quirk had been accepted by Izuku? How much would his telekinesis have been affected? More importantly, could Izuku fulfill the legacy of All Might? No, now is not the moment to dwell on hypothetical scenarios. He had to concentrate on picking a suitable name. The other students swiftly select their names. Earphone Jack is the option Jiro choose. Tentacle, by Shoji. Cellophane, by Siro. Tailman, by Ojiro. Sato, Sugarman. Ashido adopts the moniker, Pinky, to her obvious annoyance. Chargebolt, by Kaminari. Invisible Girl, by Hagakure. Yaoyorozu's, Kriti, film. Todoroki takes an unexpected action. He simply writes his given name without providing any context. Since everyone knows who you are, I suppose there's really no need to hide your identity when you're the son of the number 2 hero. The process of selecting names is still ongoing. Tsukuyomi is presented by Tokiyami. Grape Juice, by Mineta. Anima, by Koda. Bakugo yells, King Explosion Murder, as his hero name. No, Midnight quickly shoots it down. Why not? Insists Bakugo. The name literally has the word, murder, in it. When was the last time you heard a hero with, murder, in their names? Bakugo muttered to himself as he made his way back to his seat. Gravity was Ochako's hero name, which Izuku found adorable. Izuku, Tenya, and Katsuki were now the only ones remaining. Iida felt torn about it. His thoughts kept returning to the hospital. In the hospital hallway, Tenya took a seat on one of the seats. Locked in place, he clenched his hands together. As one might anticipate, the hospital's hallways were pristine, bright, and never really silent. Across the room from him was Tennessee, who had just left the emergency wing. While Iida's parents were gone, they talked about Tennessee's condition with the doctors. Tenya's thoughts were a flurry of feelings. Anger, fear, worry, and more. After a while, a nurse emerged from Tennessee's room and informed Tenya that his brother was prepared to visit. Tenya got up and went inside with the nurse. When Tenya saw his brother, his heart fell. On a hospital bed, Tennessee, the pro-hero Ingenium, was flat. He was wearing a hospital gown, with a blanket covering his entire body from his torso down. Tenya could still see the wires that led to the room's numerous pieces of gear escaping beneath the covers. Tenya was uneasy. The man he looked up to, his brother, now appeared vulnerable. I was hurt, permanently scarred. Tennessee smiled weakly as she looked up to meet Tenya. She said, Hey there, Tenya, Tensei. How are you? Stiffly, Tenya answered, I'm fine, although, I should be asking you that. Tennessee remarked, Oh, you know, could be worse. That joke made Tenya stiffen. It felt too close, too soon after they nearly lost him, even if his older brother was attempting to lighten the situation. When Tennessee realized this, she chose to shift the conversation. I heard my little brother got always the way to the semifinals in the sports festival, is that right? Remarked Tennessee. Tenya replied, Yes, brother, I did make it to the semifinals, but I lost. Hey, don't beat yourself up. Getting that far in your first year is pretty good, all things considered. Keep up your training, and you may be able to win it next year. Hey, I do not know about that. Some of my classmates are unbelievable in how strong they are. Before Tennessee made the decision to speak, the two fell silent. Look, the doctors already told Mom and Dad everything, so you deserve to know it too. Tenya said, Tennessee, what do you mean? The injuries I sustained from the guy who did this to me. They were pretty bad. He damaged my spine. The doctors said I'll be paralyzed for the rest of my life, Tenya. Tenya's eyes widened in surprise. He was not even aware that tears were streaming from his eyes. Tenya began to cry as the emotional reservoir finally burst. Tennessee held out a hand to console his brother, who was crying. It's not fair, Tenya screamed. You've done so much good for people, and now. They cooed. Tenya, Tenya, Tennessee. It's okay. I'm still alive and safe. Tenya brushed away the tears and lifted his glasses. He began to relax. What about your hero career? Your agency? Your sidekicks? Tenya inquired. Well, as for my career, I'll have to look into early retirement. Tennessee replied. As for my agency and sidekicks, let me handle that. They'll carry on without me. As for you. Tennessee hesitated, then resumed. My time as Ingenium may be up, but that doesn't mean the name has to fade away. Ingenium means more to the world than just one man. It's a source of hope and inspiration. A symbol of duty and helping those in need. Tenya, I want you to carry on the Ingenium name. Look, soon, you'll be starting your first internships, and you'll be deciding your hero names. When that time comes, I want you to promise me you'll choose Ingenium. Tenya shuddered and stammered. Aye, he said. Tennessee sat up fast and drew Tenya in. Promise me. Tenya furiously nodded his head. Tennessee leaned back on his bed after taking that as a yes. Tenya straightened up once more. Tennessee smiled and said, Thank you, Tenya. I know you'll do me proud. Iida pondered. I apologize, Tenya. I'm not ready to be the hero you want me to be. Iida scribbled his name down and showed it to the students. Iida's hero name was simply his first name, Tenya, just like Todoroki's before him. Iida clarified that this was a temporary term and that he could not make a final decision at this time, even if it confused the majority of the class, including Midnight. The students waited for Izuku and Katsuki after Midnight approved the name. Izuku tried to think of some clever names for heroes. However, despite his best efforts, they simply did not fit well. He attempted to use adjectives that sounded heroic, such as valiant or triumph, but they were simply too general. Izuku thought about the word apex, but he didn't feel that it was a good fit for him. It was overly stiff and arrogant, as if he were the highest point and everyone else was lower. He had no sense of superiority. All he wanted was to use his power wisely. The power he didn't have as a kid. Katsuki constantly referred to him as Deku, after learning that he was quirkless. He detested the word useless that it meant. Reminding him of his weakness was something he didn't want to do. However, Ochako stated that there are other ways to interpret it. You can do it, is another way to phrase it. That might work. Deku is a useless sounding device that is actually capable of anything. Changing the meaning and flipping the script might work. Izuku took the stage to introduce himself. The psionic hero, Deku, was the full name of the hero. Izuku gave his justification of using a friend to transform a hated nickname into something constructive. Izuku sat back down when it was accepted. Bakugo announced the Lord Explosion Destroyer as his new moniker. It should come as no surprise that this was not authorized. The code naming session was over, so there was no time for a third attempt. Aizawa regained consciousness to elaborate on the internships. After reviewing their offerings, students would select the one that best fits their needs. Those who received none would select from a separate list of 40 agencies. When the lunch bell finally rang, the students departed, accompanied by the people who were collecting their nominations. As usual, there was a lot of noise in the lunchroom. Only because the first-year students were talking about internships did it get added this time. To discuss, several of them had organized into larger groups. As an example, Izuku, Ochako, Tenya, and Sue's table was updated by their peers. Ashido said, Hey guys, have you chosen an agency yet? Mineta stressed the lady of MT. Lady, saying, I know who I'm going with. Mount. Lady. Sue said, Yeah, because you're a perverted little freak. I am what I am. Anyway, I've got an idea of who I want to intern with. What about you, Deku? Ochako responded. But the child was occupied with going through the thousands of internships that were sent to him. He appeared to be zoning out over the page with glassy eyes. Izuku murmured, waking from his daze. Were you saying something? Uraraka scowled for a moment before being her normal upbeat self again. Uraraka restated, As I was saying, I already have an idea of who I'm going to intern under. Izuku, along with anyone else who might be curious, inquired, Who? I'm thinking about interning under Gunhead. The battle hero. I thought you wanted to be more of a rescue hero. Well, I still do, but after my fight in the sports festival, I realized I needed to get stronger. Uraraka elaborated. I figured that when I'm rescuing people and a villain is still doing bad things, I can at least stop them or subdue them. What about you? Got any ideas yet? Izuku let out a sigh. Actually, I have so many ideas that I have no ideas. According to Kaminari, I don't get it. I believe it means that Midoriya has so many options that he can't choose the best one for him. Todoroki clarified. Yeah, exactly, answered Izuku. Like, I'm looking through everything in alphabetical order, and I'm just now getting to the C's. It's insane. Ashido said, well, who are you on right now? Izuku narrowed his eyes at the agency profile before him. Izuku clarified, this one is from a guy named Captain Celebrity. I remember hearing about him years ago. He set up an agency in Japan for a brief period. Sue remarked, I heard he associated with vigilantes. Mineta inquired, what's this guy's quirk? Izuku glanced over the page and said, before responding. It says his quirk is named Flight, but it's more along the lines of tactile telekinesis. Hey, that's great. The two of you share a similar quirk. You could learn so much from him. Uraraka replied. After giving it some thought, Kaminari questioned, what does tactile mean? It means that something is connected to touch. So, basically, his telekinesis is manifested through his physical body. It's what allows him to fly and other stuff. According to Uraraka, so, why do you sound apprehensive about taking this guy's offer? Because this guy's agency is in New York. The group responded to that in a big way. It was exciting for the most part. Kaminari said, dude, you're so lucky. Ashido remarked, I always wanted to go to New York. But Izuku seems to retreat deeper within himself. I mean, I guess. It's just, Izuku said slowly, attempting to organize his ideas. It's so far away, and I'll be in a completely different time zone from everyone else. I don't want to be so out of the loop from everybody. Uraraka said, hey, you don't have to limit yourself just to stick with everyone else. This could be something great for you. Besides, how many other students get to say they spent their first internship in New York of all places? Ashido went on, besides, you won't be totally out of the loop. Me and a couple of other students are trying to make a class-wide group chat so everyone can stay connected. Will this group chat have to have Eraserhead in it? Izuku inquired. Ashido said, waving her hand back and forth. We'll probably make a separate one with him in it. Hey, Izuku said with a small laugh. He glanced back down at Captain Celebrity's photo. The silly smile of the American hero did appear to be inviting. Izuku considered the arguments put forth by his peers. It would be inconvenient to travel to a city in a foreign country, but when would he ever get the chance to do it again? Additionally, he might learn how to better manage his telekinesis from this Captain Celebrity. Furthermore, All Might began his hero career in America before relocating to Japan on a full-time basis, right? Perhaps spending some time in the United States will prove advantageous in the long run. Izuku replied, I'll think about it. Anyway, who are the rest of you thinking about interning under? Everyone in the group went around making their selections. Some were clear-cut, like Sue working as an intern for sea rescue hero Selkie. Some were a little unexpected. Shoto stated that he intended to work as his father's intern. Given the boy's tense connection with his father, Izuku was a little concerned, even though the rest of the group might not have found this odd. Despite his personal feelings, Todoroki told Midoriya and the others that Endeavor was the nation's top fire quirk user. Todoroki thought, why not take a lesson from the finest if he wanted to better manage his fire? When the day finally ended, everyone was prepared to go home. Ochako and Izuku searched for Tenya, but the engine boy was gone. The two were aware that their friend was having problems, but they were unable to attempt to assist him while Iida remained so distant. Although it wasn't immediately apparent that Tenya required assistance, Izuku and Ochako could sense that their friend was suffering from something. As they walked back, the two hoped Iida wouldn't try to do something risky. After some time, Izuku returned to his residence. Izuku rode the elevator up to his floor and found his unit number. Izuku opened the door and entered, oblivious to the commotion behind it. Izuku could see his mother's well-known high bun and a wild mop of black hair behind the couch. Izuku hardly noticed when he shut the door behind him. Izuku said, "Hi, Mom," and removed his shoes. "I'm back from school." "Oh, hi, Izuku," exclaimed Inko. "How was your first day back in school?" "Kind of hectic, all things considered. We are already choosing internships right after the sports festival." "Well, let me cook dinner, and then we can discuss all about it." "Yeah," a voice that sounded faintly familiar said. "You can tell us what kind of offers the winner of the sports festival gets." Izuku gaped at the man beside his mother as the two adults got to their feet. Something seemed to click in his mind. Even though Izuku hadn't seen him in years, he appeared to be exactly the same. His hairstyle was identical to Izuku's. His freckles were the same as Izuku's. Even the way he moved around the couch was nearly identical to Izuku's. "Dad," Izuku uttered incredulously. Hisashi Midoriya said, "Hey there, champ," as he spread his arms wide. "How about you give your old man a hug?" Izuku was frozen in place as his father walked toward him. Abruptly, he rushed into his father's arms and gave him a firm squeeze. The sudden pressure made Hisashi grunt, but he gave a sincere hug in response. Izuku whispered into his father's shirt, "You're here. You're really here." Hisashi said, "I am. Didn't your mother tell you I was coming home for a bit?" "She did, but I didn't think you'd really." "I know," replying Hisashi. "I know it's been a long time, but I'm back." The two guys turned to face Inko, who was in the kitchen area, after hearing a clearing of the throat. "I'm sorry for bother the both of you, but is there anything in particular you two would like for dinner?" replied Inko. Hisashi broke the embrace to go into the kitchen and remarked, "If you'll let me, I've got some recipes to try out." Inko made fun of her husband by saying, "You have recipes? My, how things have changed from the Hisashi I knew. Hey, I didn't have my beautiful and talented wife to cook my dinners for me in the States. I had to learn some culinary skills." In front of the still emotional and stunned Izuku, the two kissed. After a while, the telekinetic child shook himself out of it. Izuku hesitated, attempting to formulate the question properly. "Wow, I mean," he said. "Dad, why come home now? Why now after all this time?" Hisashi looked across at his son. There was a fleeting look of guilt and grief on the man's face. But he soon returned to his cheerful demeanor. "Well, champ, the higher-ups at my job saw all the hard work I was doing and allowed me to take an extended leave to be with you too," Hisashi clarified. "But that's not all," said Hisashi. "Those same higher-ups also saw your performance in the sports festival, just like I did. And let me tell you, they were very impressed with what they saw." "Dad, I don't understand. Why does this involve you coming back home and not just a video call?" "Well, Izuku, that's why I wanted to discuss your internships over dinner. We want to help you find the best pro to study and train under. To really bring out your potential. What do these rich, important people see in me?" He said, "Well, champ, Hisashi. They see that your future as a pro hero is going to change the world." Izuku and his dad had a lengthy conversation about internships over dinner. Quite lengthy and filled with back and forth on Izuku's potential internship in America. For a first-year student to intern abroad, especially for the first time, was almost unheard of. To put it mildly, Inko was apprehensive about allowing her son to travel abroad for hero job. Hisashi was more forthcoming and supportive of the concept, stating that Izuku would have a fantastic opportunity to learn about the methods used by pro heroes in other nations. Unbeknownst to Izuku or Inko, Mr. Continuum urged Hisashi to persuade Izuku to travel abroad. The father does not yet know the reason. It was also difficult to persuade Ua to release Izuku. Eraserhead in particular needed considerable persuasion to permit this foreign assignment, but in the end, everyone consented to let Izuku work as an intern for Captain Celebrity in America. Accepting the offer was simple, but getting ready for it would be difficult. Izuku had to first obtain a passport because he had never left the nation before. It was lengthy and dull, but not particularly challenging. The linguistic barrier came in second. English was the primary language in the United States, and it was unknown how many proficient Japanese speakers Captain Celebrity employed. Izuku was in a better position than his peers. By studying old interviews of All Might from the hero's time in America, he did teach himself how to understand English. He didn't speak as well as, example, the horned American girl in Class 1B, but he was able to have a conversation because to present Mike's lessons. The time difference was the final significant obstacle. New York and Musudafu were in completely separate time zones. This implies that Izuku would have to depart late at night or early in the morning if he wished to get to his internship at roughly the same time as his peers. Being unable to wish his buddies success as they all departed together did dampen Izuku's mood. But sometimes that's the way things are. Although the flight was lengthy, it wasn't too unpleasant. Incredibly lengthy. A flight lasting more than 10 hours is hardly anything to laugh about. Izuku was not prepared for the jet lag he experienced, not even by his training or the times he had to trek to the restroom. Izuku felt as though he had reached a degree of lethargy that no man had ever experienced before or since. He found some relief in stretching while he waited for his luggage to arrive, but it already felt like he was up against one of the hardest obstacles he would encounter throughout this internship. Izuku left baggage claim and navigated the airport's winding curves until he reached the open lobby. He noticed a sign with his name inscribed in both Japanese and English as he looked out over the large arena filled with people coming and going. Izuku found the two men beneath the sign and headed down. One was a normal-looking Japanese man, while the other appeared to be the epitome of every possible American secret government agent appearance. In English, the secret agent man asked, "Are you Izuku Midoriya?" "Yes," Izuku responded, his nervousness making his voice a little higher than usual. "Follow us then," Izuku heard the other man say to the agent. "See, I told you he could speak English. I don't understand why you needed me here." As the three of them departed, Izuku trailed the two as they made their way to the entrance via the congested airport. A black SUV was waiting for them. Izuku and the other man entered in the center, while the agent entered on the right. Throughout the trip, another agent guy was driving and remained silent. From JFK Airport, they traveled the route that led to Manhattan. Along with other sights he observed throughout his journey across Long Island, Izuku was in awe of the metropolitan skyline. The man said, "So, how good's your English?" in Japanese. Izuku replied, "Oh, pretty good, I guess." "Good, because you do not want what happened to me happen to you." Intrigued, Izuku questioned, "What happened?" "Well, it started on my first day as a pro hero in New York." "Wait, so you were originally not from here? Where are you from?" "I started out in Naruhata." "You, Musufatu." The man continued, "Neat. Now, where was I? Oh, right. So, it's my first day here, and Captain Celebrity and I just saved this plane from crashing into the city. I was then swarmed by all these reporters. They start asking me questions, but I didn't know English very well back then. So I tried just to get by with this phase a friend who's really good at marketing gave to me. Then, this drunk guy brought up something up from my previous job, and like I said, I didn't understand English, and I was still going with the phrase. So, in the end, I accidentally implied I was going to smash Wall Street." "What? I'm serious. That's what happened," the man said, scowling as he concluded his tale. "Man, it took forever to get my reputation out of the gutter after that. I'm pretty sure some of my coworkers still hold that against me because it was such a PR nightmare." He held out his hand and added, "Anyway, I'm Koichi Hamawari. Once we're suited up, just call me the Skycrawler. You know, secret identities and all that." After saying, "Izuku Midoriya. Hero name. Deku," Izuku finished shaking hands. "So, what are we going to do when we get to Captain Celebrity's hero agency?" For the first time during the entire voyage, the secret agent guy said, "Once we arrive at the Captain Celebrity Corporation building, the captain will give you your schedule for the week. And probably some sleep." "That plane ride couldn't have been comfortable," replied Skycrawler. Izuku's response was a weary sigh. The automobile travel seemed to drag on, even though it was far shorter than the plane ride. Not just because Izuku was tired, but also because of the traffic in New York City. I suppose that's just the way things are in the Big Apple. They finally reached the Captain Celebrity Tower, which is situated in the center of Manhattan. Izuku appeared to be about to faint from sleep fatigue, which is the major reason the trip was brief. Izuku sat down on the bed and left like a light after a brief tour of his chamber. Captain Celebrity gave Izuku a brief tour of the offices the following morning. Meeting the other pro-heroes that the captain employed was the high point. There were Neptune, a rambunctious man with hydrokinesis. Safeguard, a tall, well-built woman whose quirk enabled her to create large shields from upper forearms. Quickstep, a young, lithe woman with super speed. Gateway, a man with the ability to open green portals channeled through his staff. And the Shade, a dark, cowled hero who was actually quite friendly when not on the clock. They comprised a team of the Captain's Pro-Hero Company, together with Skycrawler and Captain Celebrity. The strange aura surrounding Gateway made him stand out among the others. Like the other heroes, he was kind and hospitable, but Izuku found one thing he said very noteworthy. Izuku could still hear him say, "I see," but he was primarily talking to himself. "You are the one who will bring great change to the world." Odd. But the remainder of the day was less confusing. The other interns were introduced to Izuku. Like him, they were also heroes in training. His imperfect command of the English language made it challenging for him to completely comprehend the slang and in-jokes of his contemporaries. But he was able to connect with people who shared his passion for hero. In terms of activities, he engaged in dull intern tasks. After receiving a brief tour of the administrative offices, he was assigned to busy work. Izuku hoped to accomplish more than office labor in his brief time in America, but it was nice to hear some of the senior members compliment him for organizing files or destroying old papers. He did not find it as difficult as he had anticipated to stay in touch with his buddies in Japan. Some of his pals would still be up to talk to him, even though he was late in responding and messaging about his adventures. Despite the fact that it was likely late in Japan, they required as much sleep as possible for their internships. When Izuku learned that Captain Celebrity would be working one-on-one with him for training, his spirits were lifted after a lackluster first official day. Izuku and the other interns would be divided up among the pro-hero who best complemented their quirks, and they would train under them, the captain stated. In order to start their training, Izuku and Captain Celebrity would travel to an upstate New York forest. The moment arrived during a morning in which Izuku was positively bouncing with enthusiasm and vitality. Captain Celebrity and Deku were by themselves in a forest after a couple of hours of driving up north and a short walk. Captain Celebrity stretched and said, "Okay, kid. Today, we're going to test your quirk in new ways." Izuku replied, "I am ready, sir." "Good, love to hear that. Now, first question, what are some similarities in our quirks?" We both utilize telekinesis, sir." The captain answered, "Yeah, you're right," as he walked to a big rock in the ground. "However, it's in the way we use it that makes us different. See, I got tactile telekinesis, which means my quirk comes out when I make physical contact with objects." Izuku found out that the captain's full name was Christopher Skyline. He hoisted the rock above his head with one hand. The rock was sufficiently large to allow the muscular captain to lie on it without any portion of him hanging off. Chris was clutching it like a beach ball, though, thanks to his quirk. "Yours, from what I've been told, mostly rely on your brain. Here, catch." Captain Celebrity tossed the big rock to Izuku gently. Now, Izuku would flee to avoid being crushed if he were just a regular person. Instead, Izuku used his telekinesis to grasp the rock, extending his hands as though he were doing so. Izuku then carefully placed the rock on the ground. Captain Celebrity said, Okay, I'm starting to see the picture here. Now, Izuku, I've also read that you can use your telekinesis to increase your strength, correct?" "Yes, sir. I mainly use it to either increase the power of my blows or strengthen my defenses." "Alright, now let's try and apply it for something else. I want you to use that technique, but instead of striking power, I want you to use it to increase your lifting power and pick up that same rock with your hands." Izuku walked over to the rock and nodded. Izuku covered himself with his strength and attempted to get beneath it and raise it. It was difficult. It seemed as though he was just moving himself or that he may unintentionally shatter the rock in pieces. Izuku did, however, attempt a minor modification to his approach. He dispersed his telekinesis across his body and the rock rather than just covering himself. Izuku was able to raise the rock with his own hands by using his telekinesis to manipulate both his body and the mineral. It went fairly well for an initial try. Aside from the fact that Izuku's shape was becoming more erratic every second. Izuku struggled to maintain a stable stance by rocking back and forth, but eventually he had to let the rock fall back to the ground. "I'm sorry, sir," Izuku's breathless voice replied. "I was trying to keep it steady, but it felt like I was unbalanced, and I dropped it." The words, "Hey, take it easy kid," Chris said to him. "Just shows you're not used to working your quirk in that way. And in any case, you don't need my help to show you how to lift things with your quirk. You've already got a strong way of doing that all on your own." Thank you, Captain Celebrity, sir. Now, on to the next part of this exercise, flying. You have flown using your own quirk, right?" "Yes, I have. Ever measured how high you flew?" "Oh," Izuku paused to reflect. "I haven't officially measured, but I would say around, maybe 200 meters into the air." Shears whispered to himself, and that would be, before speaking again in his typical manner. "Okay, so you haven't flown that high yet. Not to worry, I'll be here to help you fly higher than ever before." "Really? Sure, and I'm hoping your time here would go towards your flying license in Japan." Izuku said, "My flying license, sir." "Oh, right," exclaimed Chris. If a hero is able to fly up to a certain point, they are in need to register and eventually receive a flying license. This is to ensure that a hero would be able to navigate the skies and avoid any head-on collisions with birds, planes, and other heroes. Trust me, it's not as tough as you think. Nodding, Izuku said, "Ooh, I get it. I guess there's just not a lot of pro heroes in Japan who have the ability or need to get one. Yeah, flight quirks are not super common, but there are enough around to have laws passed for them. Now, for this exercise, I'm going to give it to you very simple." "Yes, sir, I'm ready for it." "Okay," replied Captain Celebrity. "I want you to fly up as high as you can. And that's the gist of it." Izuku arched an eyebrow, asking, "Really?" "Well, no, not really," explained Shears. "This is just a test to measure how well your body reacts to the changing air pressure the higher you go. Certain quirks allow people to go higher and faster than others. I want to know how your quirk will protect you." "I understand. And Izuku, if you feel like it becomes harder to breathe or anything of the sort, come down immediately. You don't need to push yourself when the situation doesn't call for it." Izuku gave a nod and started floating. He asked Captain Celebrity one final question before launching into the skies. "Are you not going to follow me up?" "I will, just at a further distance. After all, this is supposed to test how you feel about flying on your own." Izuku gave a nod, clenched his muscles, and shot skyward. Skyline trailed him languidly. Izuku was pushing harder than ever, pushing farther. As he ascended, the wind whipped in his face. Izuku exclaimed, "Woo-hoo," as he rose into the sky. Captain Celebrity was out to the side, monitoring Izuku's progress and keeping an eye out for any aircraft. Izuku pushed higher and higher till he was almost breaking the friction layer, as Captain Celebrity pointed out. The captain watched as Izuku continued to soar until it eventually crossed the 1-kilometer mark. Izuku's ascension abruptly came to a halt, and he started to fall freely. Seeing this instantly, Skyline sped in the direction of the tumbling teenager. Izuku was on the verge of catching the intern when he abruptly regained control and descended in a magnificent arc. Captain Celebrity greeted him promptly. "Are you all right?" queried Skyline. Despite shivering, Izuku nodded. "Why yes, sir, it's just really cold up there." With relief, Captain Celebrity exhaled. "Well, at least we know what we can add some insulation to your next costume." "Yeah, it was just so amazing up there. Like I could go anywhere and do anything. That I can be as free as I wanted to be. Is that what it's like up there, Captain Celebrity?" "Well, I won't deny there's something magical up there. Now then, take 5 because this little excursion isn't over yet." The two trained and experimented with Izuku's power for hours. They eventually had to make their way back to the tower. Izuku exuded a euphoric enthusiasm. In fact, he was learning how to use his powers from professionals who were aware of his skill set. He did, of course, take All Might's and the other UA professors' lectures to heart. However, hearing from someone who has gone through similar things with their quirks was helpful. Izuku went to bed contented after a brief afternoon and evening spent doing more office work and exploring Manhattan. Although the internships did not live up to expectations, he made progress in honing his talents for his future profession. Izuku anticipated that this internship would be over quickly. However, life seldom turns out the way you expect it to, as anyone working in the pro-hero industry can tell you. Izuku Midoriya's internship in America was currently uneventful. At the moment, he was eating lunch with a few of his fellow interns in one of the break rooms. He had katsudon, his favorite dish, for lunch from a local bodega. He had never had a better katsudon. His mother's cooking and lunch rushes were far superior. It was still a tasty supper, though. Izuku realized something was wrong with Captain Celebrity when he reflected on this morning. The hero appeared nervous and strained. Perhaps his fellow interns had knowledge that he did not. Izuku questioned everyone in attendance. "Hey, do you know what is going on with Captain Celebrity? He seems more stressed than usual." Kaylee, a girl from New Jersey whose quirk allowed her to create a hard light construct around her body, commented, "Oh yeah, it might be because of the rumors going around." "What rumors?" "That some of the pro-heroes are planning to break away from Captain Celebrity and form their own agency." "Really? And you think they are going to do that?" Horace went on. "I don't see why they won't," a Bronx boy with dark skin whose quirk allowed him to control some level of electricity. "They're getting pretty popular already," Horace added. "Some of the ones who are thinking about forming their own group are pretty high up in the rankings." It wouldn't be too hard for them to set up shop in another hood and start business. Izuku gave a sympathetic nod. Although he was always aware that the pro-hero industry was somewhat cutthroat, this was the first time it had directly confronted him. Izuku didn't want to know the stresses of managing a hero agency if you were experiencing visual stress due to speculations of agency members quitting. Do we know what heroes are suspected of leaving? Izuku inquired. Horus responded, I think it's a majority of the B team and some sidekicks. It's not just the heroes either. I'm hearing some senior staff members might be sailing ship if this actually happens. Kaylee said. Izuku asked, wow, does that happen a lot over here? Horus gave a shrug. Kaylee responded by stating, most of the time it happens in the big cities like here or Jersey City. Every city's got its own subcultures and all that.
Joseph, another international intern like Izuku, said, I can't say how it works in America, but back home, we have bureaus that help put pro-heroes where they need to be. Would you say it works like that in your home, Izuku? German-born Joseph possessed a quirk that made him stronger and more resilient. It was simple, but it did the job. Izuku felt more at ease with his accent showing in his, what he considered to be mediocre, English because Joseph's accent was always visible when he spoke the language. As Izuku put it, man, running a hero agency must be tough. Adding, good thing it's not a problem we have to deal with, Horus said. Actually, I have been meaning to ask all of you, have you seen any of the pros in the office today? Joseph responded to the group. Izuku gave a headshake. No, Horus replied, yeah. Most of the people here are office workers. Do any of you know where the heroes are? Got any messages from any of them? Replied Kaylee. They realized how odd it was when they all said no. There must have been a reason why the heroes were so silent. But all of a sudden, a brief alarm went off in the building. Despite their brief stay, the interns immediately became accustomed to it. It was a call for all available pro-heroes to gather and deploy. It just so happened that Skycrawler ran straight inside the break area. Heads up, guys, said Skycrawler. Get geared up and meet up in the main conference room in under 30. We've got a situation at Niagara Falls, and we need all of you ready. Then Skycrawler was gone as fast as he had come. The interns ate their lunch as quickly as they could and hurried out to put on their uniforms. When they all got there, they witnessed Skycrawler, Captain Celebrity, and the other members of the A-team receiving their briefing. All right, said Captain Celebrity, this is the situation. A group of villains have announced they are planning to take over Niagara Falls. They're holding civilians hostage and keeping the police at bay. Skycrawler, you and the interns handle saving and escorting civilians away from the fight. Me and the rest of the team will engage with the villains. Safety guard questioned, what about the B team? Won't their assistance be beneficial? Chris exhaled before saying, I've tried getting in contact with them, but no one is responding. Looks like it's just us. We'll be more than enough to this. All right, everyone, you know what to do. Let's go. After that brief meeting, Izuku and the interns head to the rooftop hangar, following Skycrawler. Skycrawler, sir, inquired Joseph, who was actually Uber. How will we get from Manhattan to Niagara Falls in time? That was Izuku's question, too. But judging by the smug expressions on Horus's and Kaylee's faces, he thought there might be more. Skycrawler smiled reassuringly. Guess we never told you about the Aerojets, did we? Both Uber and Deku questioned. The what? Hero name shock. Horus laughed at the bewilderment of the two foreign interns. Oh man, when you two see the Aerojets, you are going to be in for a shock. Everyone spotted it when they arrived at the hangar. The Aerojet, a modern aircraft big enough to carry a hero party and fast enough to fly across the nation in an hour. Captain Celebrity and his agency weren't the only ones using the Aerojets. A highly rich and experienced support organization leased them to hero agencies over the nation. One of the Aerojets was already in the air, carrying Captain Celebrity and the other members of the A-team. The interns were summoned to one of the other Aerojets by Skycrawler. The plane took off with little to no wait time after Izuku and his companions sat down. Even though the trip was short, there was still time for some discussion. Shock grumbled, man, I'd wish they'd let us help with fighting the villains. I've been wanting to test some new uses of my powers. Hey, we're helping people out, Ms. Astounding, Kaylee's hero name, shot back. Besides, we're just interns. We'll get more opportunities to fight real villains later. As Izuku said, I am inclined to agree with you, Ms. Astounding, I already had a run-in with some villains already. I'd rather not go through that again. Wanting more background,
The interns gazed expectantly at Izuku and asked, "Wait, you already fought some villains?" Izuku informed them about the attack on his USJ trip by the League of Villains. This came as such a surprise to the others. None of them were actively participating in a conflict, but they all related stories of being close to hero and villain battles. Particularly when Hero School was still in session. It provided context for Izuku's tenure at UA. How much might occur in such a short period of time? The Aerojet eventually reached Niagara Falls. Captain Celebrity and heroes engaged in combat with a gang of villains as the landing hatch opened. However, that was not the purpose of the interns. Their purpose was to aid the defenseless. Those who were trapped in the crossfire on boats, those who were escaping for their lives, and those who gathered with their families close to rubble piles. Skycrawler said, "Okay guys, you know what to do. Go," before stepping out of the spacecraft. Soon after, the interns arrived. A support object that grew into a metal disc was extracted by shock. The intern hero hovered along the ground while lightning raged around it. Uber and Ms. Astounding were both telekinetically carried near the ground by Izuku. Ms. Astounding went looking for civilians while enclosing herself in a construct. Uber fell to the ground and ran to assist. Izuku hovered around, scanning for any indications of danger. As he pursued the source of the sound, a huge explosion echoed in his ears. He saw a number of rocks falling in the direction of a family that was running away. Izuku moved quickly, telekinetically capturing the debris and tossing it into a vacant area of water. Izuku looked at the family once again. "Do any of you need assistance towards the safe zone?" Izuku responded. To say no, the family shook their heads. "Okay, the police line should be further that way. You won't miss it." Izuku indicated a greater distance from the water. In exchange, the family's father nodded and expressed gratitude. Izuku felt a small amount of goodwill growing within of him as the family departed. Saving people with a smile was what he had always desired. He had the ability and the chance to do so now. This period of reflection was short-lived, as Skycrawler summoned Izuku's attention. With a shout of, "Deku!" the hero went up to the intern. "We got a stalled boat right in the middle of the fight. We're going to bring it back to the shore. I'll push, you'll pull. You can do that right?" "Yes, sir," Izuku said, nodding off. With a thumbs up, Skycrawler said, "Great." And the two took off for the boat. The passengers waved to their rescuers. Izuku remained at the bow while Skycrawler made his way to the stern. Izuku's telekinetic grip encased the ship. Skycrawler nodded at him, the go-to. Izuku found it difficult to pull the ship. It was still a large ship with many passengers, even with Skycrawler's assistance. Izuku had never felt such a weight before. Furthermore, a combat was still in progress. In other words, he had to prevent any debris from falling on him in addition to dragging a ship to safety. Fortunately, Izuku got support from his fellow hero interns. Ms. Astounding constructed a gigantic image of herself holding an Uber in her hand. When a piece of debris or rubble approached too closely, Uber leapt and used his strength to smash it apart. Each time he fell into the water, he was caught by Ms. Astounding's enormous, light, hard-handed hand. The ship was eventually dragged ashore. Shock used his quirk to electrically open the doors and assisted in escorting the people out the ship. Izuku lowered himself and rested on the railing. He was exhausted from the ship pushing. Izuku saw that his nose was bleeding and paused to heal. Shock said, "Hey, you okay, man?" Deku reassured his other intern, Yeah, I'm fine, just need a moment to rest my quirk." With the words, "All right, I think all the civilians are away from the action," Skycrawler touched down directly next them. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked, turning to face Izuku. "Yeah, just need to rest for a bit." Skycrawler turned to face the other interns, who had now assembled in the same location. "Good, okay," he said. "I'm going back out there to fight the villains. You all keep the civilians safe and away from harm." "Got it." The interns gave a nod. "Okay, cool, I'm gonna go." Skycrawler then took off to join the conflict. The interns watched the battle develop, poised and ready. "Hey, I don't know if you all saw this, but don't the villains have extremely similar quirks to the B team?" questioned Ms. Astounding. Izuku strained to watch the action as he peered up. The 6 villains shared many of the same themes and abilities as the B team. Like the hero Rough Rider, their leader was a man dressed in a traditional army uniform. A figure who resembled Tungsten Figure was wearing steel mechanized armor. She Grendel-like strength was possessed by a gigantic, orange-skinned monster lady. A big, Viking-looking man wielded his axe like Jotnar and blasted a wave of ice through it. There was a husband-wife tag team with abilities strikingly comparable to those of the size-changing Kai Jim. The latter hero was going through a messy rebranding phase of his life, and the tiny, winged hornet. "You're right," remarked Izuku. "It would be strange if it was one person, but the whole team. No, there has to be something else going on." "Yeah, it's like there," Horus said, but Kaylee cut him off. "Evil versions of the B team?" Izuku questioned. "Could that be a possibility?" To which Kaylee said, "There's a whole host of other stuff, evil clones, alternate universe versions, a group of villains dressing up like them and besmirching their name, mind control." The group turned to find Uber staring up at the same conflict and said, "Actually, I think it may be just that. Can any of you see the backs of the villains' necks?" In one way or another, all three of them said no. Unlike Uber, their quirks did not provide them improved vision. "Well, on the back of their necks, there seems to be small, electronic devices that connect to their spinal cord. It could be that these devices are the ones causing this behavior." Uber clarified. Kaylee thought, "And if they're in control the B team?" Horus concluded, "Then there's someone controlling them. Do you know who this real villain could be? Or if he's even here?" Izuku inquired. Kaylee replied, "Actually, I do have a hunch. There's a villain here that specializes in mind control. Calls himself Professor Bellum or something like that. Would he be here? Is his range long enough for him to hide out and watch his plan unfold?" "Maybe, but the guy's an egomaniac. He's always at the scene so he can personally watch his plans succeed." Eagerly, Shock said, "Then the guy's somewhere near here. Let's find this guy and kick his ass." Izuku said, "Wait, I think we need to free the B team first. Once he loses his main pieces, he'll be caught off guard. And if he's as theatric as Ms. Astounding claims him to be, then he'll out himself instantly." Uber inquired, "So, how do we free them?" Izuku considered the circumstances and the equipment at their disposal. To turn off those control devices, they required a solution. If Izuku had a strong enough grip, he could rip them out telekinetically, but it also caused the heroes of the B team great pain. However, Shock has access to the electromagnetic spectrum. Can he do it, though, given his range? Deku questioned his fellow intern. "Shock, how far is your range at making an EMP?" Shock pointed to the conflict and said, "An EMP? Not far enough to get them. But what if you had something to boost your pulse? Say, a series of hard light constructs?" Surprised, Ms. Astounding blinked. With trepidation, she replied, I guess I could do that. Never had to refract an EMP before." Deku pleaded, "Will you be willing to try?" "I will. Wait, just one thing. Is this going to seriously wreck my phone? Because I really don't want to buy a new one." Electricity crackled in Shock's hand. "It might knock it out for a few hours at least. Then again, we'll probably be wrecking a lot of electronic devices with this move. I'm for it. I think the saying is, hope they have insurance." Uber laughed. Izuku said, "All right, everyone ready?" They all gave a nod of agreement. "Do it." The size of Ms. Astounding's self-concept increased. To increase the EMP's range, the hands moved inside dishes. In Shock's hands, said EMP was now charging. At the same time, Skycrawler and his comrades were gradually losing the battle. The savagery of the transformed heroes was simply overwhelming them. "Here it comes," shouted Shock when he sensed the pulse was correct. Both horizontally and vertically, the pulse spread. It stretched through the harsh light to the area where the heroes were engaged in combat. The criminals abruptly came to a halt and dropped to their knees. After examining the villains, the pro-heroes shockingly discovered that they were, in fact, mind-controlled by their fellow heroes. Uber mentioned that he heard a pretty loud yell of dissatisfaction coming from up the falls to the east while the heroes were recuperating. "That must be where the villain is. Come on, we have to stop him from fleeing." Izuku responded. "Hey, are you able to use your quirk after the nosebleed?" Shock inquired. Izuku wiped at his nose. "No new blood. I'm fine. Let's go." Ascending the falls were the four interns. Ms. Astounding utilized her creation to climb higher. Shock used his magnetic metal disc, and Deku telekinetically flew while simultaneously carrying Uber. They located Professor Bellum after they had all climbed up there. The villain was positioned next to some sophisticated equipment on an eye-catching open bed truck. He was frantically pressing and pleading to get to work on the remote control in his hands. He had the appearance and demeanor of a Saturday morning villain. He wore thick-rimmed glasses that covered his eyes, was bald, and was currently losing his temper over his plans being thwarted. "Professor!" Bellum roared into the sky, "No. How could my perfect plan be foiled? I spent 6 months preparing, setting up the right factors, and at the moment of my triumph, it fails. How? Who www? Shock remarked, "Wow, you were right, Ms. Astounding, he is overdramatic." The evil outburst from Professor Bellum made even Izuku smile. It brought back memories of all the manga he had read as a child, where the antagonist spirals out of control once their scheme is foiled. Let's hope he doesn't have a secret power-up or backup plan in the works. "We need to get the heroes over here as soon as possible," Izuku said. "Any ideas?" "I've got an idea," Ms. Astounding replying. To signal the heroes, Ms. Astounding used her quirk to create a huge, hard light hand. Professor Bellum became aware of this as well and discovered the intern's hiding place. "What in the children?" yelled Professor Bellum. "Are you telling me mere children prevented my master plan? Inconceivable, impossible, infuriating, even." Izuku did his best hero voice for the statement, "Your schemes end now, villain," and felt it sounded fairly well. But Professor Bellum grinned evilly. "How cute. You think you four can put me away? Even without those heroes under my control, I still have enough cunning and weapons to take down the 4 of you." Uber jerked a thumb to the side and interrupted, "Excuse me, Professor Bellum, I believe you have visitors." Professor Bellum's mouth fell open as he turned his head. All of the heroes from the A and B teams were up above. Captain Celebrity remarked, "I apologize, Professor, but it appears that your experiment has ended too soon." "Well, drat," replying the villain. "The fallout was quite simple. The police arrested Professor Bellum so he might be tried for his crimes. To ensure that none of Bellum's tech had any long-term repercussions on their minds and neurological systems, the B team would need to undergo additional medical testing. Additionally, Captain Celebrity personally thanked the 4 interns on their excellent work in identifying the villain and defending the civilians. Izuku was particularly struck by his statement that they all had bright futures ahead of them. Izuku understood he had to live up to the expectations of these American heroes if they were to consider him one of the best. Izuku read about other people's ongoing hero internships and shared his own day in the group chat. Izuku finally put the phone away and went to sleep, anticipating the following day. Izuku Midoriya was in bed, fast asleep. There was a beautiful rhythm to his quiet, soft breathing. Izuku slept against the cool winter night, curled up under the sheets of his makeshift intern bed. Wake up. Heroes were the theme of Izuku's dreams. Regarding his future, one where he was smiling while he defeated evil and saved innocent people. Fans showered him with admiration, but Izuku accepted it with humility. Being a hero wasn't about fame or glory, after all. It was acting appropriately with your gifts. Wake up, Izuku Midoriya. Wake up. However, the happy and beautiful dream quickly turned gloomy. Izuku's skull thumped with agony. He sensed a malevolent presence, and blood poured from his nose. A much more powerful and sinister presence than the antagonists Midoriya has hitherto faced. As Izuku felt the weight pressing down on his consciousness, the presence became into pressure. Izuku looked down and gasped, feeling an unusual warmth. His own body was being sliced through like knives by crystals that were protruding from it. Pressure kept building as they started to pass him. Izuku was aware that he needed to escape, but it was too much. Too much. Wake up now. Izuku gave a startled start. He sat for a few long, drawn-out seconds in his bed. He was perspiring profusely and breathing deeply. Was all of that a dream? It's just a nightmare. Izuku, however, sensed that there was another person in the room. He turned to see Gateway. His eyes shone in the darkness with a gentle green brightness. Shaken and perplexed, Izuku said, "Gateway. I don't understand, what are you doing here?" The hero only grinned. "Good, you are awake. Prepare for a mission and meet in the common room soon. You are needed." "Wait, what do you mean I'm needed? For what, and why now?" "You are needed." Izuku was left alone as Gateway burned brighter and brighter before vanishing in a flash. Izuku, still perplexed, chose to follow the hero's advice and put on some clothes. Izuku hurried to the common room after putting on his uniform, only to see Gateway staring at the television. It was set to live coverage of a monster invasion on a city. Izuku's heart grew dreadful at the sight of the heroes and villains as the live broadcast concentrated on their action. The beasts resembled the Nomu monster that attacked the USJ in a terrifying way. Compared to the massive beast that was the Nomu, the monsters of today had various bodies, thus it wasn't the same one. However, they shared characteristics, such as the group's savage temperament, lipless lips, and exposed brains. Is the League of Villains responsible for this? Gateway asked. You recognize these monsters, Izuku Midoriya. Izuku glanced down at the box at the bottom of the screen and said, why yes, I do. They look like the one that attacked my class's field trip, but where? Live from Hosu City, was written on it. Izuku let out a gasp. Iida was in that location. It seems likely that his friend was now a part of this citywide assault. The pro-heroes were rushing to repel the Nomus when Izuku turned back to the television. What they were fighting against was unknown to them. In addition, they were making a valiant effort to protect people. It wasn't easy because of the Namus's rage. Hold on a second, wasn't Hosu City also where the final sighting of occurred? The hero killer, Izuku exclaimed, panting. Gateway noticed right away. Izuku grunted to let him know there was more. The hero killer. He's been making headways by killing pro-heroes. No one knows why or how he does it. But, if he's there, and the Nomus too, then are they working together? Two different groups of villains. Gateway wrote, these monsters are called Nomus, then. The heroes seem to have trouble keeping them at bay. Yeah, the last one I fought was designed to kill All Might. However, these don't appear as tough. You fought one of these before. Yes, but All Might was the one who beat it. I can't help but think that this attack and the one at USJ were done by the same villain group. I'm pretty sure anyone from my class there would recognize those monsters as. Izuku took a breath. Oh no, Iida. Who? My friend. He was at the attack at the USJ, and he's here in Hosu City for his internship. I think I know why. Gateway silently led Izuku to continue. His brother was seriously hurt by the hero killer. We've been worried about him, especially after he got an internship with a hero in Hosu, but he said he's doing fine. And now in the chaos of this Nomu attack, he might try and get revenge on the hero killer. The Gateway said. What? Iida wouldn't do something like that. He's a rule follower. If he goes off on his own to find the hero killer, then he'd be breaking the law. Revenge can drive us to do things we would not normally do. Izuku kept watching the live feed, staring in disbelief. However, the nagging sense of hope never goes away. The heroes can win against this. They're strong and skilled. They'll save the day. Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. They might have a better chance if they know what they are fighting against. And what about your friend, Iida? Do they know about him, of his circumstance, of his vendetta against the hero killer? What are you saying? Why even wake me up and show me this? What do you want me to do? Izuku responded. You hold valuable information that can save the lives of your friends, your heroes, and the innocent. What would happen if you were not there to help? How many more lives would be lost because you couldn't act? Gateway went on. I don't know, and even then, I couldn't do anything from here. I'm halfway across the world. I'd either need to fly at extreme speeds, or I'd need to be teleported. Izuku stopped when the thought struck him. That's why you woke me up. You want to send me there to help. Gateway replied, indeed, I was called to send you to Hosu City. You were needed there. But why me? What can I do? I'm not a pro-hero. I don't even have a provisional license. Need I remind you that you have crucial information against these villains? You fought these Nomu and survived. You know about your friend's desire for revenge and can stop him. If I did that, I'd be breaking the law. I can't use my quirk without a license. If the authorities ever found out I did so, they would never let me be a pro-hero. Gateway asked, and would let such a thing as a law stop you from doing the right thing? Let me make this known to you, Izuku Midoriya, a hero's goal is to safeguard life. We may obey the law, but if the law restricts us from our goal, it may be necessary to bend or ignore said law in order to save innocents. Would you let your laws stop you from saving your friends, your family, or would you save them anyway, because you know what a hero is supposed to do? Izuku considered this. He was aware that using his quirk for unlicensed hero work was wrong. He was reminded of this reality year after year through presentations. His heart, however, knew better. He was aware of his expertise and ability to protect others from these Nomus. He was aware that he needed to protect Iida from himself. Would the danger be sufficient, though? Is it reasonable for him to risk his hero career for the sake of saving one person? Izuku recalled the moment he learned that Bakugo had been attacked by the same sludge villain that he had been. He pondered what he would do if he were present and saw his old friend being buried alongside the villain in a fire. Izuku believed that he would have been too frozen by dread as the heroes watched in disbelief as Bakugo slowly suffocated. That his friend would not have been set free by anything he might have done. However, Izuku was not the same boy as he was a year ago. He was powerful. He understood that he was making it better every day. Despite seeing the faces of evil, he decided to fight back against USJ. Would he still live with himself if he rejected Gateway's idea, if he just went back to sleep and didn't pay any attention to what was going on? As an individual, like a hero, no, he wouldn't. Izuku gritted his teeth. Izuku knew he had to make the correct decision, even though his stomach was starting to get uneasy. In response, Izuku said, "I'll do it. Send me to Hosu City. I'll try to fight off the Nomu and save my friend." Under his hood, Gateway grinned. "Good. I'm glad your heroic spirit is so strong. Here, let me send you on your way." Before them was an ethereal green gateway. A picture of the skyline of Hosu City emerged through it. Smoke and flame blended with bright blue. "Before I go, how will you know when to send me back here?" Izuku responded. "I have my ways of keeping track of you," Gateway said. "Once your tasks have been completed, I'll open a portal to bring you home." "That doesn't really answer my question." Gateway's face was still stoned. Izuku let go and moved in the direction of the gateway. He lowered his costume's hood as he passed through, exposing a fresh mask to conceal his face. The gateway behind him closed as he entered a Hosu City rooftop, and he found himself alone in the commotion. Deku declared, "All right, time to save the day." With lightning speed, Izuku shot into the air. He mostly saw heroes attempting to maintain order during the evacuation or citizens still running away when he looked down below, which wasn't much because the Nomu took everyone by surprise. Izuku still had work to do. He kept soaring, searching for any Nomu's overpowering heroes or Iida, the hero killer. For now, no such luck. He had to continue. Izuku saw one of the Nomus following one of the plumes of smoke. The winged monster was running away from the scene. Izuku saw the remains of a train line when he peered down. The vehicles were ripped apart and derailed. A number of heroes were trying to recover the passengers, either alive or dead. Izuku was in a furious rage. He wasn't going to allow this monster get away with hurting all those people. Somehow, I have to stop it. Izuku pondered. I might be able to root it. Izuku used his telekinesis to grasp the Nomu and keep it there. The Nomu was stopped in midair, thus it worked. But it sought to wrestle out of Izuku's grasp after noticing his attempts to trap it. Deku struggled against it and then slammed the Nomu hard against the pavement. It continued to struggle against Deku's telekinetic grip. In order to pin the Nomu to the ground, Izuku looked for something substantial and weighty. Izuku pulled them up and aligned them with the Nomu after discovering some of the train's wreckage. They were hurled down onto the Nomu by a gesture, pinning its neck, wings, and limbs. Deku gave the homemade shackles one last telekinetic shove as it fought to break free. The winged Nomu was rendered helpless as it pressed the shackles against the earth. Izuku heard someone shouting at him as he paused to gather his breath. He took off again, praying that no heroes or recording phones had noticed what he had done. A quick survey of the city showed that the threat posed by the Nomu was being eliminated. Shoto was beside Endeavor as he set a Nomu on fire. The rest of Endeavor's sidekicks were dealing with another. Deku hurried off to resume his hunt for Iida, figuring they were getting by just fine without his assistance. Izuku was growing frantic. Nowhere in the open did he find Iida. Where might he be? What's more, how could Izuku locate him? There was no way to follow Iida's phone, was there? Hold on, Izuku's eyes grew wide. He recalled that he and Iida had received an invitation to a group chat before the internships. Pro heroes and heroes in training like them had exclusive access to it. It was created years ago on Island by a tech genius. Police scanners, instant connection to emergency services, and other functions were among its many built-in features. For any hero who registered with the system, however, the location finder was the most crucial function. Iida was one of them. Izuku snatched up his phone and fumbled with it until he managed to retrieve Iida's whereabouts. Izuku spotted it and ran for it at once. He was guided by the tracker to an alleyway quite a distance from the mayhem. There, he saw Iida's recognizable silver armor on the ground, face down, and a man with a katana above Iida's head. Izuku booked it, moving closer and closer before blasting the attacker with telekinetic energy. The man was shoved away from Iida, who gazed up in shock at his rescuer. "Midoriya!" cried Iida, floating down into the alley. Izuku observed the spectacle. There was another pro-hero in addition to himself and Iida. Because the hero's outfit was made to honor his Native American heritage, Izuku was able to identify him as Native. Native could see the hero was still alive, but he was bloodied and immobile. In a similar vein, Iida was prone and bleeding. Izuku noticed a man wearing a handmade outfit made out of belts, wrappings, and knives as he peered down farther into the alley. The sole color contrast to his black costume was the blood-red mask and scarf. As he recovered from Deku's opening blow, the hero killer growled. "Another interruption. Midoriya," said Iida again, "what are you doing here? How are you even here? Look, I know I'm supposed to be in America, but I couldn't stand by and let people get hurt." Izuku responded, "I also couldn't let you hurt yourself trying to stop the hero killer. As for I got here, well, let's just say I had help. Can you get up?" "And no," said Iida. "It's his quirk. It lets him paralyze you." Couldn't figure out what was the catalyst thought. "Okay, just have to be careful around him while I get you and Native out." "Tell me, child," called Stain. Stain pointed his katana at Iida and said, "This one sought me to fulfill his quest for vengeance. What do you seek? Is that your true purpose for being here?" Izuku replied, "I'm here to save people. And that if that means standing up to you, then so be it. HNNGH, let's see if your actions match your words." Stain ran like a crazy person. Quicker than the average person. As Stain slashed at Izuku, he threw up his telekinetic barrier. Despite the barrier, Izuku felt the bruises appear on his arms as he skidded back. Izuku had to get away from Stain, so he started collecting debris from the alley and hurling it at the hero killer using telekinesis. A crate struck him in the torso, pushing Stain as he ducked around the smaller projectiles. Izuku then used the occasion to push Iida and Native away from the conflict while piling on a number of other medium-sized trash. Iida questioned, "Why? Why are you even here?" Izuku said, "Because I care about you, Iida. You're my friend. I couldn't let you destroy yourself over your vendetta against Stain. But it was my feud with the hero killer. My own battle. Stain was right. I'm not a hero. I didn't care about saving Native. I just wanted revenge for my brother. You should have let Stain finish me off then and there." "No." Izuku's remarks gave Iida a start. "I didn't, and I'm glad I did. You may have gone in for the wrong reasons, but that doesn't mean you don't deserve a chance at being a hero. I couldn't let Stain end you even if I wanted. Because being a hero means you don't stand by while other people are in danger." Iida shut his eyes in embarrassment and then opened them again. "Be careful, Midoriya. Stain is far more skilled than we previously thought." As Izuku nodded, "I know, I don't think I have a chance at beating him. My best bet is to stall him before the other pros arrive to help." "You think they'll arrive soon enough?" "They will, I'm sure of it," Iida said. "Midoriya, Deku," in a strained tone. "Good luck." "Thanks." There was a piercing whistle of air, and Izuku felt a knife slit his cheek. Izuku cautiously felt for blood on his face. He turned immediately to see his blood slowly pouring from the blade of the knife that was affixed to the wall. Then Deku faced Stain again, who had hurled multiple tiny blades directly at the future hero. Before rushing at Stain, Deku telekinetically grabbed the blades and hurled them away from his sides. After a fight, Izuku used a telekinetic explosion to drive Stain away. "Removing the injured before rushing off to fight me," Stain said. "Perhaps there is more to you than the others." Izuku asked, "Why are you even evaluating my actions? You kill heroes for crying out loud." Deku's telekinesis held improvised blades made from scrap metal and Stain's katana crashed with the two. "That name, hero killer, is wrongfully applied to me. I do not kill heroes. I kill fakes," Stain clarified. Izuku exclaimed, "What?" before the two parted ways. "These pro-heroes have defiled the meaning of the word hero," replied Stain. "They have turned a selfless profession, a title of legends, into one of greed and vanity. These fakes fight for fame and profit, not genuine heroism. Even if that's true, you could have still tried to be a hero. The hero you wanted to see in the world. You don't have the right to kill anyone." "Oh, I tried that once. But then I realized that you can't change the system from the inside. There is no saving this disease from itself. So, I've taken the only effective way to change. Cutting the rot away one fake at a time. Is that your plan then? Kill every hero you come across?" Stain said, Most, because there is one left who still embodies the true meaning of hero. All Might, as if the name of the hero were divine. Seriously? Izuku asked, clearly perplexed. Doesn't he also do some of the same things you accuse other pro-heroes of? I have a bedroom full of All Might merch to disprove your ideology. All Might is different, was Stain's scathing response. He uses his earnings to help others with not a cent left for himself. He gives everything he has for the people. That is what it means to be a hero. I can't even begin to tell you how wrong you are. In fact, why am I even bothering arguing ideology with a murderer anyway? I'm still going to put a stop to you. Stain grunted in response and went back to attacking. He kept slashing at Deku. But Stain's sword could not penetrate the boy's telekinetic shield. The swordsman decided to keep going, slashing at various areas of Deku's body to find a weak spot. After that, Stain gave Deku one last downward slash. However, the boy's hands managed to snag it in time. Izuku's telekinesis buffeted the blade, but for how long? Stain tried to force the blade out of Izuku's hand and asked, "What makes you think you can win against me, child?" "Because it's my duty as a hero to save the innocent and stop the villains," Izuku said, straining against the katana. "Like you." Stain scoffed. "Then let's see if you truly measure up to the word hero." The sword was removed from Izuku's grasp by Stain. Stain kicked Deku in the torso, sending him flying against a wall, taking advantage of the boy's imbalanced state. Izuku became better as he watched Stain dash over to where Iida and Native were. Deku prepared for another telekinetic shove as he hurried after the hero killer. Izuku continued to fly ahead as he tossed it, but the hero killer leapt onto the wall's side and flipped Izuku and the blast over. Deku stopped and turned to charge again, only to discover that the hero killer was no longer there. Izuku was scouring the alley quickly when he felt his body freeze and collapsed on the ground, face down. Izuku attempted to tell his body to stand up, to move a muscle, to do something. However, it was useless. The hero killer's quirk had incapacitated him. Deku could still glance up with his eyes. Stain, with the dagger he had thrown at Deku earlier, stood above him. Izuku could tell the sword was licked clean of blood even from where he was standing. Blood. He paralyzes them like that. Izuku understood. I wish I had discovered it sooner. The words, "You were disappointing, child," said Stain. I had hoped your words would have led to the actions of a true hero. A shame it was not to be. Then again, what else should I have expected from a student of fake heroes? You, Izuku uttered with clenched teeth. You won't get away with this. There will be others to stop you. Yes, there will be plenty of fakes hoping to claim satisfaction for my defeat. They will not get it. Now, I must finish what I came here to do. Stain then strolled quietly away from Deku and toward Native and Iida. Izuku kept fighting the paralysis, but it didn't help. He was lying on the ground like a dead fish because his limbs were not reacting. Stain approached the fallen Native and Iida after performing a little ceremonial of wiping his katana. Think, Midoriya, please. There must be a method to escape the consequences of his quirk. Let's review the information. He can't paralyze you without blood. Well, it's not like he freezes your blood in place because you're still breathing and thinking. My ideas aren't getting through to any of my muscles. Additionally, my mind is racing with all the potential ways that Stain's quirk could function, making it difficult to focus. Hold on a second. Brain. Quirk. That's it. I could still be able to use my quirk. If only I could focus. Izuku concentrated on his telekinesis with all of his mental strength. Bits and fragments began to drift slowly off the ground, indicating that his telekinesis was still active. My telekinesis focuses more on mental strength than physical strength. Izuku understood. All I need to do now is stop Stain with my quirk. Izuku shifted his telekinetic hold slowly and awkwardly toward Stain's direction. The paralysis made this difficult. Although it did not completely stop him from using his power, Izuku was subjected to more restrictions, which made it more difficult to focus when using it. Furthermore, it was difficult to target Stain with poor visibility because he was unable to move his head very much. With his blade lifted, Stain prepared to kill the prone Native. Izuku frantically looked for something to grip, something to stop Stain. Izuku selected the long red cloth he used for a mask. Izuku grabbed Stain's scarf's tassels with his telekinesis and pulled before Stain could execute the fatal blow. In shock, the hero killer's neck abruptly snapped back. This was more of a nuisance than a final blow because the telekinesis was using roughly the same amount of force as a normal person. In an attempt to free the hero killer from Native and Iida, Izuku tugged and pulled at him. When Stain finally had enough, he severed the portion that Izuku was using his quirk to hold. He simultaneously hurled a little knife that cut Izuku's hand, forcing the boy to scream in agony. With sincere rage in the hero killer's eyes, Stain walked toward the unconscious Izuku. I had planned on sparing you, child, but you are proving yourself to be too much of a hindrance to be left unchecked. Stain sighed. Know that your death was brought upon entirely by your own fault. Izuku closed his eyes, praying for a quick death as Stain raised his blade. A wall of ice shards suddenly materialized between Deku and Stain. Izuku tried to tilt his head to see his savior's visage, but he knew who it was. Todoroki, exclaimed Iida. According to Shodo, yes, it's me, I followed your location through the app. Then Shodo turned to face Izuku. I thought you were supposed to be in America, Midoriya. Hey, Todoroki, remarked Izuku. It's a long story, but we got bigger problems at the moment. I see. So, this is the supposed hero killer. At Todoroki's entrance, Stain snarled. I am tired of being interrupted by children. Yeah, must be irritating, isn't it? Todoroki asked, glancing over at the prone Deku. Any advice on how to beat him? Izuku cautioned, watch out for his knives. If he gets your blood, then he can paralyze you. That's how his quirk works. Then I'll just have to not get cut. As he danced his lethal fight with Stain, Todoroki braced himself. While Shoto used both fire and ice to keep the hero killer away from him, Stain would slash an attempt to cut Todoroki with his arsenal of blades. Deku, meanwhile, kept trying to stand up. Despite his best efforts, he was unable to flex his muscles. Right up until his finger started moving. Then one more, and one more. Izuku first used his hands, then his toes, and finally he was able to stand and walk by himself. Izuku was taken aback and hurried to check on Iida and Native to see whether they could move independently. Iida cried, Midoriya, you're free. How? I don't know, said Izuku. I think Stain's quirk just wears off over time. Can you or Native move? Iida attempted to move but remained motionless. No, I can't. How did it wear off for you first? You were paralyzed later than me. Maybe it's a distribution thing. It gets weaker the more people he uses it on. Not likely. The two teenagers were interrupted by Native's abrupt voice. I've been hit by that nutjob's quirk longer than the both of you, and I still can't move my body. If your theory was true, I should have been freed by now. Anyone got another idea? Well, my best guess would be that Stain's quirk probably varies based on the blood type. Mine's type O, yours. A, Iida said. I got B type, Native replied. Maybe that's it. Stain's quirk lacing power varies on blood types. He probably can paralyze B types longer since that's the closest to his type. And mine was the furthest, so that's why my paralysis was so short. That's great, kid. Any idea on how that's going to help you stop the hero killer? It'll give us a time frame on how soon you two will be able to move again. Look, I'll help Todoroki fight off Stain. Try and get the hero's attention as soon as you're able to move. Izuku took off like a rocket. As he charged, he knocked Stain away from Todoroki. Good to see you moving again, Todoroki remarked. How did you get free of his quirk? His quirk is dependent on his victim's blood type. The closest the blood type is to Stain's, the paralysis lasts longer. My blood type is O, so I was able to get free quicker. B-type blood is the one that'll keep you paralyzed the longest. What's yours, Todoroki? O-type. Oh, hey, we share the same blood type. Neat. Stain replied, you really are clever, figuring out how my blood curdle works, and stood up. However, it won't save you from my blade. We don't need to beat you. Just to stall you until the real heroes get here. Todoroki replied. Before rushing and slashing at the two heroes in training, Stain's rage surged in his voice. I will not let my crusade be ruined by children and fakes. He said. Stain was being matched by the two students. The hero killer had to deal with thrown projectiles, fire, ice, and punches that were amplified by telekinetics. Although the odds were in the hero's favor, Stain's proficiency with blades prevented them from completely overwhelming him. Iida, meanwhile, felt Stain's quirk's effects subside until he could move once again. His conscience overrode his want to charge in and vanquish Stain. He learned from his rescue efforts that he had to tend to the injured. Stain was correct after all. What type of hero puts exacting revenge ahead of protecting the lives of others? Iida promptly gave Native enough attention to keep him from bleeding out before joining the battle. The hero killer was unable to handle the combined power of Izuku, Shoto, and Tenya. Despite all of Stain's abilities, the three students' strength was overwhelming him. He continued to look for a way out. In an attempt to paralyze one of the heroes, knives were flung in all directions. But they all managed to avoid or deflect a knife that was aimed at them or their companions. Stain eventually became so exhausted that Tenya's final blow was the move that ultimately brought him down. Unconscious, Stain collapsed on the ground. Iida gazed down at his brother's crippling man. The man who robbed his sibling of his heroic destiny. In his attempt to exact revenge on his brother, the man almost killed Iida. Izuku knew he had to ensure his friend didn't take a bad turn as he gazed at the comatose hero killer. Izuku hesitantly said, "Iida, what are we going to do with him?" Iida sighed and closed his eyes before responding. "We'll bring him to the proper authorities. There, the legal system will give him the punishment he deserves." Izuku grinned. "There's our rule-following vice president we all know and love. I'm sure this is touching and all, but unless either you two got permission to arrest this guy, we didn't exactly get authorized to use our quirks for hero work." Todoroki made the point. "Oh, yeah," Izuku said, averting his ashamed gaze. "That does put a wrench into things." Native responded, "If it helps, I'll cover for you," and started to move independently once more. "I'll say I authorized you to use your quirks after the hero killer attacked me." "Really? Thank you. Don't make this whole thing a habit though. I'm only doing this because you three saved my life. If none of you were here, I'd be a goner by now." Iida said, "Thank you." Native and Shoto and Izuku followed suit. "Now, we should remove any other weapons he may have kept hidden. Do any of you have any capture tape on your personnel?" Izuku gave a headshake. "Sorry, I got ready in a rush. My father usually does most of the work, or lets his sidekicks handle things. I usually just stand aside and watch." Todoroki sighed. "I've got some," replied Native. Iida tied Stain up and started taking knives away from him. The four heroes hauled Stain out of the alley after securing the hero killer. Todoroki then started questioning Izuku. "You never really answered how you were able to travel from America to Japan so fast. How did you do it, Midoriya?" "Well, that's Izuku said, stammering. "You see, it's a sort of complicated situation. Did you fly over here?" "No, my flight's not that fast." "Then how can one cross the ocean in such a short amount of time?" "I mean, there's teleportation. Are you saying you teleported here? On your own?" No, I can't teleport." "Then how? Unless you enlisted someone else's help." Izuku muttered, "I mean, they sort of enlisted me." "Aha," said Todoroki. "You did have assistance. Who, Midoriya, who brought you over here?" Well, I can't really say. It's really a volatile thing. I don't know if I can even talk about it. But you do know who it is, don't you?" "Actually, Midoriya," Iida said. "I have been wondering as well who sent you over here from America." I don't, Izuku said, still stuttering. "Come on, Gateway," Deku remembered. "Please send me back right away. Look, can I please explain everything after we're done with the internships?" Izuku begged. "I promise to answer as much as I can. I just need to go over some things before." Shoto, there you are. Endeavor, in his great, stern, flaming splendor, stood across the way. "I was wondering where you ran off to," said the hero with the number 2. "Did you leave an important mission to fraternize with your classmates?" "Get me out immediately, Gateway, if you can hear what I'm thinking." Todoroki pointed to Stain's unconscious body and said, "If by fraternizing, you mean taking down the hero killer, then yes, I did." Endeavor merely conveyed his astonishment at seeing the hero killer restrained and unconscious with the smallest of gestures. Then his expression reverted to its normal seriousness. "You and your friends will have a lot of explaining to do," Shoto, Endeavor stated. "Especially in regards to your allies and their whereabouts." Endeavor stepped aside to expose the normal hero, Manuel, who hurried to see how his intern was doing. "Iida, there you are," Manuel said in a voice that was distinctly worried. "When those monsters attacked, I lost you in the chaos. I'd thought you got attacked by one of those things or worse. Is this where you've been?" To which Iida said, Yes, Manuel, sir, I am sorry for abandoning you during this time of crisis." "Abandon? What are you?" Native raised his voice and said, We can save this talk for the police station. Right now, we need to get a transport for our hero killer here and, arg. A knife was stabbed into the back of Native's leg, causing him to cry. A second flew out and almost struck a few of the heroes. Fortunately, it went crazy and didn't hit anyone. When they all turned, they saw Stain unbound. He arose, aiming his sword at the heroes gathered in front of him despite his terrible condition. I am the bringer of the end for every fake hero and petty criminal that scourge this earth, Stain stated. That is my mission. He lifted his head and the cloth dropped from his face. At the sight of Stain's face, Izuku and a few others gasped. It was discovered that the hero killer just had the remnants of a nose. He breathed like a wounded animal, and there was a strong purpose in his eyes. I will restore the true meaning of the word hero. The only recourse is through blood, and I will be its agent. So come at me, you fakes. I pledge that I will not rest, I will not falter until every pretender falls to my blade. If I fall, then it will not be at the hands of you. For only one man has permission to defeat me, All Might. There was an air of bloodlust about Stain. Izuku and the other heroes were filled with a smothering sense of malice and dread. Izuku was fortunate to still be alive. Iida and Todoroki went to their knees in terror, and one of the pros passed out. It appeared that even Endeavor was surprised to witness the hero killer. Stain moved toward the direction of the heroes. Then another. He just halted on the last step. The hero killer lay on the ground, unconscious, after a tense minute of waiting in silence. His injuries appeared to have finally caught up with him. Stain was carefully taken into custody by the pros. Todoroki, Izuku, and Iida watched the pros work from the sidelines. Izuku still harbored the persistent anxiety that Stain will reappear. Shoto thought aloud, so, this is really it, isn't it? The end of the hero killer. Izuku said, yeah, I guess. How are you feeling, Iida? Iida replied, right now, I am just relieved it's over. Stain will answer for his crimes, and my brother will be avenged. Don't relax just yet, Endeavor's voice interrupted abruptly. There is still more work to be done. Not before we get these kids and Native to a hospital, stated Manuel. They're pretty banged up. Fine. After they are healed, we will bring them to local authorities to discuss their involvement with the hero killer's apprehension. Just behind him, Izuku sensed a portal open before anyone could move. He turned to find that it was Gateway's portal's distinctive green tinge. Izuku felt a hand suddenly reach out, grab him, and draw him in. Wait, Midoriya, exclaimed Iida. Izuku was returned to Captain Celebrity Tower before he could speak. Looking up at Gateway, Izuku saw the portal close. Izuku grumbled, it would have been nice if you had brought me back sooner. Now the pro heroes know I was there with Stain. What am I going to do? I pulled you back when the time was right, Gateway informed them. If you are worried about your career being in danger due to tonight's events, do not worry. I have reasonable assurance your future is still on the correct course. How do you know that? This wasn't just your idea, wasn't it? You had someone else tell you to get me. To bring me to Hosu. Why? All will be revealed eventually. Here, Gateway said, extending a tiny chewable tablet. Take this before returning to your quarters. Izuku gripped the tablet between his fingers and asked, what is it? It is designed to accelerate the body's natural healing factor. It should take care of all those pesky injuries you sustained. Izuku yelled at Gateway as he started to leave. Before you go, please answer my question. Tonight was super dangerous for me and my friends. We could lose our careers because we used our quirks without a license, and we interfered with the hero killer case. If I get caught, your involvement might be revealed. You could lose your license too. Why would you take that sort of risk for just a foreign intern and his friends? Before responding, Gateway turned to face Izuku again. I cannot say the identity of my benefactor, but he assured me that both of our statuses as heroes will be protected. He has also convinced me that you have a destiny that must be fulfilled. A destiny? Asked Izuku. What destiny? To be what you were always meant to be, Izuku Midoriya, a hero. Gateway walked away. Izuku accepted the tablet and, because he had nothing else to do, went to take off his hero outfit. The suit itself was filthy and in need of washing, but thankfully it was undamaged. Izuku felt the effects of the drug at work as he altered. Bruises vanished, cuts scabbed and then healed in a few minutes, and his internal pain quickly went away. Izuku eventually made his way back to his room and passed out on his bed. Despite his best efforts, the young hero had trouble falling asleep. His head was buzzing with questions and possibilities. Why was he actually selected to stop the hero killer in Hosu? Who was the benefactor of Gateway? What would happen to Izuku? What prevented him from having a typical internship like everyone else? Why did he and his pals become entangled in the schemes of the villains? His mind was clouded by these and other things until he was eventually overcome by tiredness.
So this was the end of the series. I hope you enjoyed it. To watch more series like this, subscribe to my channel. Till then, bye bye.